King of France. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151 King of the Hussars. And Ning hurriedly apologized to the painter David, and then left the room. David didn't say anything, and followed him out. In the square of the monastery, there was indeed a team of hussars. The uniforms of the hussars were very gorgeous. This uniform is said to have been passed down from the time of Attila. It consists of two tops called darman and paris, which looks like a piece of clothing half draped over the body as a cloak. It is said that many nobles became hussars because of the gorgeous uniforms of the hussars. Of course, the uniforms of the hussars are also quite expensive. After all, there are so many buttons and densely packed lines on the uniforms, which take a lot of man-hours to sew. If it is made by a more famous tailor, such a uniform may cost the same price as a good horse. Because of this, most members of the hussars are either rich or noble, and many people will ask famous tailors to make their own exclusive uniforms. In addition to their beautiful appearance, the hussars have another famous feature: very poor military discipline. This is also a common problem of troops in this era that require extra subjective initiative. A standard hussar is usually proficient in eating, drinking, whoring and gambling, and regards charging on the battlefield as an exciting game. Antoine Louis Charles Lassalle is the most typical hussar, and is known as the King of Hussars. Ning recognized Lassalle at a glance because he loved smoking and never put down his pipe. Moreover, his pipe was very large, with a long mouthpiece, and it was like holding a scimitar in his hand. When Lassalle saw Ning, he immediately straightened up on his horse, raised his head high, and posed in the posture of a cavalry review. "Look, the bravest man in France is here. Salute to you, General Frost." When he spoke, the two mustaches on his mouth trembled, making him look like a cartoon character. To be honest, it was the first time Ning saw someone with a mustache that looked like the teeth of a mammoth in real life. "And Ning, I don't deserve it. I'm a little surprised. They told me that if I killed Lafayette, all the nobles would stay away from me. Aren't the hussars mainly composed of nobles?" Lassalle: "This is a reasonable inference. But hussars also admire warriors. A warrior who rushes towards 40,000 enemy troops alone will naturally attract hussars." As soon as the voice fell, the hussars behind Lassalle cheered together. "That's right. Salute to your courage. Well, it seems that there are rumors outside that Ning rushed towards 40,000 enemies alone. Maybe it's him who killed Lafayette's 40,000 people by himself. And Ning, welcome to join. To be honest, we are very short of cavalry now, very short of it. In this era, reconnaissance and communication between troops basically rely on cavalry. The number of cavalry determines to a certain extent how much range an army can control. Without cavalry, the troops will become blind. Lassalle, now that you have the cavalry, if you need it, I can also write to a few cavalry officers I know and persuade them to bring their troops here. And Ning, then I'll leave it to you." Lassalle saluted Ning again, and then he seemed to finally be unable to resist the urge to smoke, picked up the cigarette holder, took a big puff, and then blew out a smoke ring with a look of satisfaction. After taking a puff, Lassalle said again, "By the way, I heard that your cavalry are all ladies. I wonder if I have the honor to meet them." And Ning suddenly became alert. Damn. The hussars with the worst military discipline asked where the female soldiers were as soon as they arrived. "Is this a pig looking for cabbage?" And Ning, "I am very short of cavalry now. Every cavalry is a valuable combat force for me. Don't let my cavalry units suffer non-combat casualties, Lassalle." Lassalle laughed, and even the hussars behind him laughed together, as if Ning had just made a joke. After laughing, Lassalle waved his pipe and said to Ning, "Don't worry, General Frost. We hussars are only interested in good wine and fighting in battle. I can't wait any longer. When are you going to Paris? And as for Bouillet's royalist army, as well as the Austrians and Prussians, you lead us to kill them all." Good man, this guy is also a warmonger? And Ning wanted to hold his forehead, always feeling that he had accepted a troublemaker. And Ning, don't worry, there will be plenty of battles to fight in the future. If my guess is correct, there will be continuous turmoil in the future, and soon the battles will be too much to bear. Lassalle was overjoyed. "That's great. Damn, this warmonger actually said that was great?" Then Lassalle said his signature line to Ning, "I have always believed that a hussar who lives past the age of 30 is a complete bastard. So you can use me as much as you want, Send me to the most dangerous place, and let me dance with the god of death. And Ning wanted to hold his forehead. No, no, your first task is reconnaissance, and hussars are an important reconnaissance force. LaSalle, of course, it also includes reconnaissance. Ha, leave it all to me. But now there is an important question. My brothers and I have run hundreds of miles to join you. Now we need to rest. Who should I ask for a barracks? And Ning turned to Lazare Cano and said, arrange a barracks for him, and be careful to stay away from female soldiers. Lazare Cano nodded, then stepped forward. Follow me, I will take you to the barracks. Then Cano walked to the hitching post, untied his horse, jumped on the horse and left the monastery. The hussars saluted Ning one after another, and then followed him away. Ning looked at this gorgeous army rumbling away and sighed. LaSalle was a very outstanding cavalry officer. If he commanded a cavalry brigade, there should be no one better than him during the entire revolution. Even Murat could not compare with him. But the problem is that Murat has the talent of a marshal, and LaSalle does not have this talent. As long as the troops he commands exceed one division, there will be problems. So in real history, although he knew Napoleon very early and made great achievements under Napoleon's command in the decisive Battle of Rivoli, LaSalle used 2 regiments of 600 or 700 hussars to attack the 6,000 Austrian troops who had just left the Adige Valley, and then forced the enemy to retreat to the valley with the cooperation of the artillery commanded by Napoleon himself. But such a fierce general did not get the rank of marshal until his death, and the highest was only a major general. So Napoleon also saw that this person could only be a cavalry unit commander. And Ning, who was familiar with all this, certainly knew how to use LaSalle. However, they were all famous French generals famous for cavalry. Compared with LaSalle, and Ning hoped to get Murat. And Ning was thinking about this kind of thing, watching all the hussars disappear outside the gate of the monastery. Then he turned around and saw the painter David drawing something with a sketchbook. And Ning, what are you drawing? David, I'm recording history. General Frost meets his future cavalry commander. What do you think? And Ning, how do you know he's my cavalry commander? Because he looks like a typical hussar, rude, reckless, and heroic. David smiled, don't you think? And Ning also smiled, yes. But the cavalry commander of my dreams has not arrived yet. When I find him, I will let you know. David, I'm looking forward to it. And Ning, let's go back and continue painting your picture. Okay. David was full of energy. At this moment, Beethoven rode into the monastery on horseback. General Frost, I have finished that piece of music. Please be sure to listen to it. And Ning looked at Beethoven. Okay, come in. It just so happens that no one is using my piano here. Chapter 152 Berthier's joining. When Beethoven dismounted and entered the house, he was still chattering about his creative experience. I tried my best to use music to express your fearlessness when you rushed towards 40,000 enemy troops. And Ning, 20,000 to 30,000, not 40,000. Sorry, your fearlessness when you rushed towards the enemy, and I made the music more lively, because I felt that you were very lively when you rushed out, without any psychological burden, as if you didn't take tens of thousands of enemies into consideration at all. At this time, the painter David interrupted Beethoven's narration. Did you see the moment when General Frost rushed towards the enemy? Beethoven, I saw it. I was in the general's camp at the time, which was the campsite the night before the battle. It was only more than 100 meters away from the front line. I saw with my own eyes that the general rushed towards the enemies all over the mountains and plains alone. David, oh, great, then I also want to listen to the song you created, so that it can help me imagine that scene. Beethoven, okay. Come on. Then Beethoven walked forward excitedly and came to the piano in the side hall of the monastery with ease. This side hall was originally used for the choir to sing, but now it is unused. Occasionally, Ning would listen to Beethoven playing new music here. Beethoven tried a few notes, confirmed that the piano was in good condition, took a deep breath, and began to play. When Ning heard the prelude, his brows twisted into a knot. He was too familiar with this melody. The first time he heard this melody was when he was watching the old movie Tank Decisive Battle, which tells the story of the US military during the Ardennes counterattack. There are also some descriptions of the German side, including a scene where the commander of the German Pioneer Armored Brigade inspected his recruits. At that time, the officer angrily scolded, "These are all children, it is impossible to complete the counterattack," and then the young German soldiers stomped their feet and sang a German military song together. Later, and Ning learned that this song was called the Song of the Armored Soldiers. Yes, Beethoven wrote the Song of the Armored Soldiers. And Ning wanted to hold his forehead. Could it be that these famous musicians actually draw cards to compose songs, and draw ready-made music from a music library? That shouldn't be right. How can a song praising a French general be a German song? Wait, Beethoven is German. Although there is no Germany yet, he is a German speaker. Suddenly it makes sense. Fortunately, France is not the French chicken that it later became, otherwise when this song sounded, the French people present would probably raise their hands habitually. In addition to Ning, the fake Frenchman, there was also a real Frenchman present. When he heard the melody, he was obviously very intoxicated and even clapped the rhythm along with the melody. While playing, Beethoven used the foot that was not on the pedal to beat the rhythm, making this song more like a movie scene in Ning's memory. After just one song, he turned his head and asked Ning, "What do you think?" And Ning nodded, "Very good, brisk, and full of fearlessness. Have you decided on the name of this song?" "No, I call it the Fourth March." And Ning, "How about I name the song?" "Of course, this is a song praising you, you can call it whatever you want." Beethoven said decisively. And Ning, "Let's call it the March of the Hussars. I feel that it fits the temperament of the Hussars very well." "What about the lyrics?" "I hope it can become a song that can be sung." And Ning has completely forgotten the lyrics of the original song, but she remembers one sentence, "Only the loyal chariot will give us a steel grave." Beethoven, "Not yet, I haven't had time to show it to my partner." And Ning, "Finish the song as soon as possible. It just so happens that we just got a bunch of hussars, so just treat it as a gift to them." Beethoven looked embarrassed. "This is a song to praise you. I originally wanted to call it the Great General Frost Marching, but I changed it to a song to praise the hussars." "No, if you think so, then let's leave it this way." It seems that Beethoven has convinced himself. And Ning stepped forward and patted his shoulder. "Don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like this song. I know you don't want us to sing praises to your bravery, you are always so modest. But modesty cannot ignore the facts." And Ning, "No, listen to me, I think songs are also a kind of fighting power. Look at the Roman Ode, the soldiers will be more courageous when singing the Roman Ode on the battlefield. I hope this excellent song can also play the same role. I hope it can inspire my soldiers and give them courage. The situation is very grim now. General Baoai is ready to make a move in the northeast, and foreign forces are also gearing up. We must use everything we can mobilize to deal with the enemy." When Ning said this, he felt like a success mentor who was fooling young people. Beethoven is indeed a young man now. But Beethoven hasn't expressed his opinion yet, and the painter David next to him, he is older than Ning, said with emotion, "Great, you are still thinking about France. Considering the future of the country." And Ning thought speechlessly, whether he would be praised for everything he does now. "Don't be like this, calm down." At this moment, Laser Carnot appeared at the door of the room and knocked gently. And Ning, "Carnot, you are back. Have the hussars been settled?" "Settled? I am not here to report this. I am here because Berthier, who is under house arrest in the monastery, just told the people who are monitoring him that he wants to see you." And Ning slammed the table. "Great. He is finally willing to join us." Beethoven, "Isn't Berthier the chief of staff of Lafayette?" "Yes, he is the best chief of staff I have ever seen, so I plan to recruit him." And Ning said, "Painter David, you actually employed your former enemy." And Ning, "I hope that all talented people can come under my command." David said, "Oh," and I don't know what he imagined. And Ning ignored him and said to Lazare Carnot, "Let's go over there quickly." Beethoven, "Wait a minute, Berthier is here to serve as chief of staff, what about Mr. Carnot?" Lazare Carnot, "I'm not very good at marching and fighting." And Ning interrupted Carnot's self-deprecation, "I have decided that if Berthier joins us and serves as chief of staff, I will set up a position of quartermaster general, at the same level as the chief of staff, responsible for the recruitment, reorganization and procurement of logistics materials of the troops. I think Laser will play an important role in this regard." Carnot, "I will do my best." And Ning nodded and strode out of the side hall. Berthier was under house arrest in a suite in the monastery, and was provided with good food and drink. When Ning entered the suite, Berthier was pacing back and forth in the room. Seeing Ning coming in, he immediately stopped and saluted Ning respectfully. "General Frost, good morning." And Ning, "Good morning. I came here as soon as I heard that you wanted to see me." Berthier frowned slightly. I can't understand why you care so much about me. I am a noble. And Ning, you are a military noble, and your father is also a military engineer. I think you are different from those nobles who suck the blood of the people. There are many such nobles in my army, such as Davu. He is my favorite general. Berthier was about to say something when he saw Lazare Carnot coming in. He was embarrassed and said after a while, "But you already have a chief of staff, and you let me be the chief of staff." "Carnot, I am better at the organization of troops and the raising of materials. To put it bluntly, I am more suitable to be the Minister of War, not the Chief of Staff. And Ning, after you join, I will appoint Laser as the Director of Quartermaster General to do what he is better at." Berthier curled his lips and said, "Do you really not care? If you ask other people, you will know that during the battle between you and Lafayette, I once suggested that Lafayette use cavalry to kill you." And Ning smiled. "We were enemies at that time, and there is nothing wrong with killing the enemy. You did everything a Chief of Staff should do, and you deserve praise." Berthier stared at Ning and was silent for a long time. Then he made a determined expression. "Okay. You have said so much, and if I disagree, it will seem too arrogant." And Ning was happy and stretched out his hand. "Come on, let's do something big." Berthier shook Ning's hand vigorously. "Don't rush me, the author is old and can't type anymore. I can only guarantee enough every day when the war comes." Chapter 153 The Commander's Eyes Set on Italy. After Berthier took office as Chief of Staff, the efficiency of the paperwork of Ning's troops was improved to a higher level. Lazare Carnot is also a rare office talent who handles a lot of documents quickly, but he is still a level lower than Berthier. Berthier may have accumulated enough energy during the previous house arrest. Anyway, after taking office as Chief of Staff, he showed amazing energy. Seeing him working frantically every day, Ning suddenly understood why Napoleon was like a different person when he commanded without Berthier. A great Chief of Staff has such a great effect. After throwing the paperwork to Berthier, Ning can finally focus on the development of the situation in the world. In October, there was good news and bad news from the north. The good news is that Prussia has temporarily given up its plan to interfere in France because it wants to concentrate its forces to confront Catherine's Tsarist Russia and strive for more benefits in the issue of dividing Poland. The bad news is that Austria has already taken action. The Austrian army led by Wurmser has left Austria and passed through Bavaria and other countries. When Ning received the news, he was stunned for a moment, wondering how the Austrian army ran to another country's territory. Then he suddenly remembered that there was still the Holy Roman Empire at that time. Bavaria and other countries were members of the Holy Roman Empire and were considered domestic of Austria. In other words, although France does not border Austria, it borders the Holy Roman Empire, which is equivalent to bordering Austria, a bit confusing. The Holy Roman Army has reached the border of France and may enter France soon. The Holy Roman Emperor Leopold II has just taken over the throne from Maria Theresa for more than a year, and he plans to regain a real throne for his sister. In this way, the Austrian Rhine Corps led by Wurmser on the northern border of France, and the Austrian-Italian Corps led by Bulow of Milan in the south are eyeing it covetously. It can be said that the situation is not optimistic. Many letters have come from Paris, urging Ning to lead the army back to Paris immediately and preside over the defense of Paris. After all, there was no Maginot Line, and Beaujolais on the northern border had rebelled against the Parliament. The Austrian army could easily march straight into the French Isle. In this situation, the Parliament had declared that Ning was not a traitor, but Lafayette was. The Parliament was deceived by Lafayette and the king, and now realized its mistake. Ning not only did not need to be responsible for his reforms in Cantal, but was also given the title of a patriotic general. However, Ning originally thought that the Parliament would pass the land distribution bill and bring forward the reforms later carried out by the Jacobins, but he was wrong. Not only did the land distribution bill not pass, but the bill to abolish the king was also in a fierce tug of war. Yes, the king had betrayed the country, but the Parliament still refused to abolish the king. It seems that nothing can be done overnight. Historically, after the king fled, France still supported the king for a year, and finally decided to chop off his family in 1792. Ning didn't care and stayed in the south. Under the joint promotion of Berthier and Lazare Carnot, Ning's military strength increased to 30,000, and the control area was more than doubled. These newly expanded control areas, because they were worried that Ning would come to hold a street lamp decoration competition, voted to cut off their own meat and distributed the fields to the farmers. The big businessmen made a choice to cut off the meat of the old nobles to please the beasts that were close at hand. The farmers knew everything and everyone praised General Frost. The effect of large-scale land distribution was that the original riots in these areas were quickly quelled, and the economy became better. After cutting off the meat, the big businessmen suddenly found that they had more money. So they also began to praise General Frost. Although the trousers in the city did not get any benefits in this process, they also had a new place to go, to join the National Guard. Because there were too many people who wanted to join the army, various places issued notices, clearly stating that the local self-defense forces had been recruited. So many trousers began to travel across mountains and rivers with their families to join Kinta. And Ning racked his brains on how to deal with these people. He couldn't recruit all of them into the army because he didn't have that much money, his army was paid in real money, and he couldn't afford to expand too much all at once. Now the military pay of 30,000 people is enough to give Ning a headache. Although he confiscated a large amount of church property, it was not unlimited. But the large number of laborers gathered in Kinta couldn't be left here and ignored. They would make trouble if they didn't have enough food. After all, they were all citizens who had been baptized by the Great Revolution. And Ning had no choice but to start a government-run factory and let them support themselves with work. Then there was a problem. In the war that ended 10 years ago, France signed a tariff treaty with Britain, and British industrial products could enter France unscrupulously. Britain was the first industrial country in Europe at that time, and its industrial products were cheap and of good quality. When it entered France, it defeated the local handicraft industry in France. If Britain was not yet a complete industrial country, I am afraid that all handicraft producers in France would be unemployed. By the way, the French Revolution was also caused by British industrial products. The dumping of British industrial products bankrupted many French handicraft factory owners and left the people without jobs. In order to sell his state-owned factories, Ning had to use the army to set up checkpoints and impose tariffs on imported British industrial products. Anyway, it was very strange. After getting rid of the domestic feudal lords, France finally had a unified market, and now this unified market was cut off by Ning. In short, in October 1791, Ning had a lot of headaches. The foreign situation, the domestic situation, and the economic problems in his own territory all made Ning headache. Ning began to miss the old days of playing badly. You say it would be great if you didn't stand out, just play it, how comfortable it would be. Troubled by these problems, for the first time after Ning traveled through time, he began to want to do something that matched his identity as a traveler. For example, launching an industrial revolution in southern France and promoting steam engines. But he immediately encountered a problem. He only knew that the steam engine boiled water and then let the cylinder push the piston to work, but he had no idea what it looked like. He couldn't rub the steam engine by hand. There were also the three major things that ordinary time travelers did: blowing glass, making soap, and inventing penicillin. He only knew the basics of all of them, and he had only learned about them from historical novels about time travelers. Now he couldn't do these things by hand. So all he could do was to issue a notice and invite engineers and scientists from all over the country to come with generous subsidies to see if they could make miracles. But these are long-term things, and it will take many years for them to really produce results. The only thing to be thankful for is that among the engineers who came to Ning, there was one who knew how to make a spinning jenny, so Ning's spinning mill was still efficient. But these couldn't quench his thirst. Before the wealth he had plundered the church was exhausted, and Ning had to find a way to enrich his financial resources, so that he could expand his army with money. And Ning thought about it day and night, and finally found that he could only go the old way and kill people and set fire to the Golden Belt. He set his sights on Napoleon's birthplace, Italy. Italy is very rich. The northern Italian region may not be large in area, but it provides a quarter of the tax base of the Holy Roman Emperor. A quarter. Ning had thought it through. Whatever the North wants, as long as Leopold II declares war, I will go to Italy. Moreover, going to Italy can not only solve financial problems, but also recruit talents. Massena, one of Napoleon's most powerful generals, was in Italy at this time. So in October 1791, Ning already had a complete plan in mind, waiting for Leopold II to declare war. Chapter 154 Why don't you declare war, Shinra-tenma? On October 15th, news finally came from the north that General Baudelaire had begun to march towards Paris. Ning was very happy to receive this news, thinking that Leopold II would declare war soon. However, after waiting for a few days, Leopold II did not move at all. And Ning had already ordered the troops to prepare to go to Italy, waiting for the declaration of war to go to Italy to discuss with Marshal Bulow of Austria. As a result, Boillard had already killed his way to Verdun, but the Holy Roman Emperor had not yet declared war. And Ning paced back and forth in front of the map every day, thinking, "What are you doing, Leopold II? Hurry up and conquer the Holy Roman Empire. How many floors can you carry a bag of rice?" There were several letters from Paris every day, urging Ning to go north to defend Paris. And Ning was also very embarrassed. The Holy Roman Empire did not declare war, and going to Italy would be an undeclared war, and he would have no reason to go. If he went north, it would be embarrassing if the war was declared halfway. He would have to use 30,000 people to face the two enemy forces of Boillard and Austria. The key is that there is no money to go north, and there is no transfusion to let Lazare Carnot recruit soldiers. He can only fight to the end with these 30,000 people. While Ning was hesitating, several officers who came to Ning brought back the latest news from Paris. Paris was already mobilizing. The revolutionary people of Paris refused to return to Paris after the royal family had betrayed the country, and joined the army one after another. Some bank owners also funded the National Assembly because they were worried that the royal party would settle old accounts after the Restoration, so they funded the National Assembly and provided the troops with more abundant military pay. The number of the National Guard in Paris has expanded to more than 80,000. A few days after this news came, new news came that the French army led by Dumouriez defeated Bouillet's royalist army in Verdun and killed a large number of enemies in the pursuit. The letters for help from Paris stopped all of a sudden. A few days later, new news came that Dumouriez was commended and promoted to lieutenant general, an honorary title. News came one after another. The National Assembly in Paris started the propaganda machine, obviously wanting to promote Dumouriez as the French god of war who was no less than Ning. General Bouillet took the remnants and ran directly across the border, taking Louis V and the Queen to exile in Austria. Until this time, Leopold II did not declare war. And Ning could only lie dormant in southern France with a depressed look on his face. In addition to reading various intelligence every day, he went to the engineers and scientists he recruited to see them tinkering with steam engines. After all, it was only half a century away from 1840 when the first industrial revolution was completed. Many technologies that were the cornerstones of the Industrial Revolution had actually appeared, and most of the technological bottlenecks that restricted technological development had actually been overcome. If Ning wanted a qualified time traveler who knew how to make cement and soap, he could have thrown his sleeves and worked hard at this time. Unfortunately, he was not. He could only watch the recruited engineers tinkering. However, Ning still had some gains in this regard. On December 4, 1791, a British infantry major who admired his achievements brought a Ferguson breech-loading rifle to Ning. The major just heard that the general liked new weapons, so he brought it as a gift, and had no idea of doing more. After all, the British Army generally believed that this difficult-to-produce rifle would hardly have any great effect. But Ning was overjoyed when he got the gun, and immediately gave it to the craftsmen gathered in Quintat to copy. The copying work was completed quickly, but at this time, the craftsmen still thought it was just a whim of the general. But soon, Ning gave the craftsmen a new order: redesign the rifle, split it into a series of parts that are more suitable for production, and then start trying to produce it in an assembly line. Yes, Ning didn't know how to rub cement and soap by hand, but he knew what an assembly line was. The assembly line method can be used to reduce the working hours of producing Ferguson rifles and reduce the cost. At this time, the craftsmen and generals realized that Ning really intended to equip breech-loading guns. Davout first raised objections, arguing that the loading process of breech-loading guns was completely different from that of muzzle-loading guns, which would invalidate the training of the troops and require retraining. Berthier believed that breech-loading guns were flashy and useless except for increasing the difficulty of supply. Napoleon was very enthusiastic about accepting new things. He specifically asked for a breech-loading gun and played with it every day. Then he asked the engineers to have a cannon that could be loaded from the breech. Napoleon also argued, "Hey, just magnify the gun 20 times, what's so difficult about that? You guys work harder." Then the engineers really took out a breech-loading gun, but on the day of the test firing, because the breech was locked so badly and leaked seriously, the test gunner was burned, and Napoleon himself also burned his arm. In short, In the last few months of 1791, Ning had almost given up the idea of going to Italy and was ready to concentrate on promoting technological innovation in his own nest. But at this time, the situation changed quietly again. The first change came from the Girondists. After Dumouriez defeated General Bouillard's royalist army, the Girondists began to believe that France, after the Great Revolution, already had an invincible army, and the French army composed of citizens was invincible. They even began to publicize that Frost was able to defeat Lafayette's army, which was 3 times larger than his own, because Lafayette's army was not revolutionary enough. In short, Frost was able to win not because of his outstanding military talent, but because the revolutionary French army was invincible. With this understanding, Brisset, one of the leaders of the Girondists, began to advocate war. He shouted in Parliament, "Who said that Leopold's throne cannot be overthrown? Who said that there will be a limit to the bravery of the French army? Who can guarantee that the French will be bound by the border? If the kings want to launch a war against the French people, then the French people will give them a war against the kings. The volcanoes that are about to erupt are everywhere, and they only need a spark to ignite them. Worrying about the consequences is unpatriotic, and war only poses a threat to the king. We will fight to Vienna and force him to hand over the traitor Louis V and his Austrian women. Bring them back and let the people judge them. Our answer is war." The Girondists in Paris were all in a frenzy, and only a few friends of peace remained sane in the whole of Paris. Robespierre was clearly opposed to the war, but now only a few people like Marat were in the entire Jacobin club in Parliament, and they were unable to stop the spreading war frenzy. The second change was that not long into 1792, Leopold II, who had always maintained restraint, died. Chapter 155. War begins. 1792, Vienna, Schönbrunn Palace. Louis V, who was in exile abroad, was pacing back and forth in the side hall of Schönbrunn Palace. "Queen Marie, you are the second heir to the Holy Roman Emperor. If France had any accident, you would be the Emperor of France and the Holy Roman Empire." The locksmith hissed, "Don't talk so loudly. If someone hears us, they will think we are playing a trick against France." Marie rolled her eyes. I have been moving around in Vienna these days, it may not be impossible." Louis V, "Stop talking. I won't do that, no. Absolutely not." Queen Marie bit her lip and finally shut up. At the same time, Franz II, who was about to ascend the throne, paced back and forth in his father's study. "My aunt has been active in Vienna recently. What does she want to do?" Franz II's younger brother, Karl Ludwig Johann Lorenz, stood straight in military uniform. "Don't worry, brother, the security of the palace is foolproof. Even if they want to plot against you, they can't succeed." Franz sighed, "Forget it, staying here will only lead to more trouble. And anyway, I don't think she is a good person. Let's declare war quickly and send her back to the throne of France. My father has always wanted to get more Polish land, so he left your legion in Hungary, but I think there is no need to use your legion just to fight France. Archduke Karl, I am ready to take your orders at any time. I am your sword, brother." Franz patted his brother's shoulder gently. "You shouldn't be needed this time." Archduke Karl had always been weak and sickly, so Franz didn't think his brother was a great general. It can only be said that he misjudged him. But it's not his fault. Maybe Andy Frost is the only one in Europe who knows how outstanding Archduke Karl is. Franz took a deep breath and said to his brother, "I have decided. After the succession ceremony, I will immediately declare war on France and send our aunt and her locksmith husband back to Paris. Although many places say that France has produced a famous General Andy Frost, I believe that a Marshal Wurmser will not lose to this fledgling boy." In Paris, early in the morning, a large group of gentlemen gathered at the Jacobin Club. Robespierre was giving a speech. "We should not start a war at this time. In war, the expansion of administrative power, the expansion of the power of military generals, the people's attention to external affairs and the worship of military leaders, and the obedience of soldiers, all of this will lead to the birth of Caesar or Cromwell-like figures. We are lucky, because Andy Frost, who performed well in the previous war, is a selfless man with no desire for power and is dedicated to France. He once had the opportunity to choose to be the Cromwell of France. Just think about it, what would happen if he marched to Paris immediately after defeating Lafayette? He would definitely become a de facto protector of the country. No force can stop him by then. But he chose to stay in Quinta. How noble it is! He must have known that revolutionary Paris would not fall easily, and General Bouillet would not be able to succeed. That's why he didn't go north. Now, if we launch a war against the European monarchs, it is very likely that Frost's efforts will not be in vain. At that time, he may be forced to fight the new Cromwell. Just like he defeated the traitor Lafayette. Robespierre was making an impassioned speech when the door suddenly opened and Marat rushed in. Ladies and gentlemen, the Parliament has just passed a resolution, with an overwhelming advantage of 710 votes to 7 votes, to declare war on Austria and the Holy Roman Empire. Robespierre was shocked. What? Marat continued with a serious look. Moreover, they also passed a resolution to appoint Andy Frost as the commander of the Italian Legion. Danton slammed the table. Damn it. They think Frost is too annoying in the country and want to send him abroad. Robespierre, now our Jacobin club has no influence on the army. It's over, no one can stop the war. He fell down one after another in dejection, sat on the chair, and sighed heavily. Quinta. After receiving the order from Paris, Ning was overjoyed and ordered the whole army to have a feast. Originally, he had prepared himself mentally. He spent the whole of 1792 tinkering with the production line in Quinta, and in 3 to 5 years, he would increase the production of breech-loading rifles to the point where they could arm some of the skirmishers. By then, all of Europe would tremble under the fierce skirmisher firepower. Of course, this would not immediately change the form of war. In fact, by the time of the American Civil War, troops had begun to be equipped with repeating rifles such as Henry rifles, and they were still lined up to be shot in battle. The form of war could not be changed by just 1 or 2 new weapons. But the breech-loading rifle would definitely give Ning's troops a certain degree of advantage. Bullying people with technological differences is also the fun of time travel. So Ning was ready to do this for the next few years, but he didn't expect the order to come. And the appointment he was given was the commander of the Italian corps, which he wanted the most. France now has a small territory in Italy, mainly starting from Nice, along a small area on the Mediterranean coast. The entire corps stationed here was assigned to Ning for command. However, unlike when Napoleon took charge of the Italian corps later, the strength of this corps was not strong. When Napoleon took charge of the Italian corps, it was already 1796, and the French army had been fighting in Italy for many years. That's why Napoleon took over such a large Italian corps. Although the supply of this corps was very poor, the soldiers didn't even have shoes, and the military pay hadn't been paid normally for a long time. But this corps does have a lot of people, and there are still tens of thousands of people after fighting for several years. And Ning doesn't have this condition. Now the French army in northern Italy is just over 10,000 people, and the area they occupy is not large. And Ning must take his troops from Nice to Italy. In this way, Ning's original troops, plus the newly assigned troops, have a total of 40,000 people. The enemy that Ning may have to face is 30,000 people from the Kingdom of Sardinia and 50,000 people from the Northern Italy Corps of Austria. Another double difference in strength. But Ning is full of confidence. This is what he said to his officers. Don't get a headache when you see that the enemy has 80,000 people. The enemy's 80,000 people are scattered everywhere, and they belong to 2 countries. The coordination between them will be very poor. We have the advantage of concentrated forces. We can adopt the method of defeating each one separately and use fast and mobile operations to eliminate the enemy. And Ning's officers looked at each other. Then Davout asked Ning on behalf of everyone, "How do you know that the Kingdom of Sardinia will join the war?" And Ning was stunned for a moment, and then he remembered that Napoleon wanted to fight the coalition forces of the Kingdom of Sardinia and Austria because the first anti-French alliance was established at that time. But the first anti-French alliance was formed after Louis V was beheaded in 1793. It hasn't been formed yet. The king's head hasn't fallen off yet. And Ning slapped his head. Wait a minute. If the Kingdom of Sardinia doesn't join the war, we can only rob Milan? No, liberate Milan. Berthier, are you planning to rob Turin, the capital of the Kingdom of Sardinia? That's what I planned, is it not okay? And Ning waved his hand. Forget it, Milan is fine. Then we are facing Buell's 50,000 Austrian troops. Gentlemen, we won against 40,000 with 15,000, so there is no reason why we can't beat 50,000. The officers all laughed. LaSalle, I still think it's too little. With 50,000, I can just send out my cavalry brigade and catch them all. Ning, just brag. Just like that, On April 14, 1792, France declared war on the Holy Roman Empire. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156: General Frost's Expedition to Italy. In the early morning when they were about to set off, and Ning had just finished breakfast when she found Fanny packing. "What are you doing?" and Ning asked in confusion. "I'm leaving with the baggage train." Fanny turned her head and glanced at Ning, then said unhappily, "I told you to find an orderly, but you only found someone to take care of your horse, but didn't find anyone to take care of you." And Ning scratched his head. "I think I can take care of myself." After all, Ning had lived independently for so many years before crossing over, and he was still confident in taking care of himself. But Fanny snorted, "When I'm not taking care of you, you always wear the same military uniform over and over again, just like Mr. Robespierre in Paris." Robespierre could be hit by AoE, which shows how deep an impression his green coat, which he never changed for thousands of years, left on Fanny. And Ning, forget it. If you want to follow the baggage train, just follow. I don't mind if someone helps me decide what to wear every day. I'll leave first. Goodbye. Fanny stopped her work and saluted Ning. And Ning straightened his military uniform and strode out of the residence. As soon as he went out, he saw Beethoven and David, who was carrying a light drawing board, riding horses past the entrance of the headquarters. And Ning, what are you two doing? Beethoven, we will move with the headquarters. Please allow me to record this expedition. I have a feeling that this expedition will go down in history. David, I think you will not refuse a painter's collection of folk songs. And Ning, okay, if you are willing to follow, just keep following. Since I can't stop my mate from following, I naturally can't refuse you. David, we will use the most artistic way to record your heroic appearance. As he was talking, Berthier came out of the headquarters. Seeing Ning, he saluted and then reported loudly, "The vanguard troops have set off first. We will try to reach Nice within 3 days and set up a supply center there." And Ning nodded, "It's all up to you." Fortunately, there was Berthier, otherwise Ning would not know how to arrange various matters for 30,000 troops. The supply of 30,000 troops alone is an extremely complicated matter. But after getting Berthier, all these complicated things can be thrown to this energetic chief of staff. Lazare Cano was left in France to run the factories and chambers of commerce that Ning had created, and to raise supplies. With the cooperation of these two capable people, Ning could easily lead his troops to Italy. The troops would first go to Nice, and then advance into Italy from the main road along the sea. This requires a big detour, and the supply distance is a lot longer. But there is no way around it. There is a kingdom of Sardinia between Ning's base and the French-controlled area in Italy. The kingdom of Sardinia did not declare war on France, so Ning had to go around. In the Napoleon Wars of another time and space, Napoleon first defeated the kingdom of Sardinia before the decisive battle with the Austrian Corps, and then signed a contract to obtain the military passage rights of the kingdom of Sardinia, allowing his supply line to pass through the territory of the kingdom of Sardinia. Then Napoleon fought a decisive battle with Marshal Buller on the Po River plain, and after winning, he went straight to Milan. After occupying Milan, relying on the rich Milan, the supply problem of the Italian Corps was completely solved. And Ning cannot fight the kingdom of Sardinia, so he must have a decisive battle with Buller as soon as possible, and occupy Milan after driving Buller away. Otherwise, the supply will be very difficult. The supply line from Nice to San Remo, through Andorra and finally to Savona is too long. Although the main roads along the way are relatively easy to travel along the coast due to the good economic development, such a long distance is unbearable. And from Savona to the Po River plain, there is a large coastal hilly area. These will affect Ning's logistics. In order to prevent his troops from being dragged down by logistics, Ning must act quickly and take Milan quickly. And Ning was thinking about this, and all the officers came out of the headquarters, and everyone looked confident. Because Napoleon was most familiar with Ning, he joked first, "Andy, why are you so serious? This battle will be much easier than fighting Lafayette." And Ning shook his head, "No, don't underestimate Marshal Buller. And the Austrian army is not comparable to Lafayette's National Guard. Lafayette's army is disunited. The grassroots soldiers are afraid of my reputation on the one hand, and envy the treatment of our army on the other hand. But the Austrian army is different. They have only heard of my name at most, and our reforms have nothing to do with them. And they speak German, which is not our language, and they will not be affected by us like Lafayette's troops." After Ning finished speaking, LaSalle added, "They also have real money for military pay." And Ning nodded, "Yes, they also have real money for military pay." At this time, Ning suddenly noticed what David was writing in his sketchbook. "What are you writing?" Ning asked curiously. "I am recording your admonitions to your subordinates. You never despise any enemy." David said, "You are worthy of being the first general of France." Ning thought to himself, "That's it, I have to add another chapter to my biography. What a great and glorious perfect man." He was too lazy to correct it, so he turned his head and said to the officers, "Okay. Get on the horse, let's go." At this time, the officers' orderly had already led their horses over. Ning's exclusive groom Julian also led Ning's big white horse over. This young man was chosen to be a groom because his name was Julian. After all, Ning was a magician on the battlefield, so the orderly who took care of him should be called Julian. But Ning thought about it and was still afraid that he would follow in the footsteps of Admiral Yang Weili, so he sent Julian to raise horses instead of really making him an orderly. Ning climbed on the horse and gently pinched the horse's belly to make the horse trot. His officers immediately followed him. The group of people marched out of the monastery's simple gate. Beethoven and David were standing on the roadside on horseback, and the painter took a sketchbook and quickly recorded the scene. In the sketchbook, Ning looked high-spirited, while the bold Davout on his left had a serious expression and fierce eyes, showing the color of a fierce general. To Davout's left was the equally serious Lannes, and Napoleon on Ning's right looked like a joyful child, while to Napoleon's right was the spirited LaSalle. Berthier may have been a surrendered general, so he followed silently at the end of the troops, with a look on his face as if he was thinking about something. As the background of this painting, the soldiers' neat bayonets looked like a forest. Following the officers, the high-spirited troops clasped neat formations, marched in neat steps to the drumbeats of the military band, and sang Ode to Rome as they walked. After drawing this sketch, David smiled and said, "I've decided, this painting will be called General Frost's Expedition to Italy." Chapter 157. As long as Dumouriez launches an attack, everything will be fine. 3 days later, Ning rode his horse and stood on the beach of Nice. It was strange to say that after so many years of traveling through time, he had never thought of coming to see the sea. LaSalle took a bunch of grapes and happily chewed them beside Ning, asking while chewing, "General, do you miss your hometown?" Ning hesitated. After traveling through time for more than 10 years, he had never returned to his hometown to take a look. The main reason was that as a time traveler, he had no sense of belonging to his hometown, and he was also worried that after he returned to his hometown, he would communicate with his relatives and be discovered. It would be troublesome if they thought he was possessed by a demon. Although the power of religion is not as strong as it was during the witch hunt, but anyway, Ning just found it troublesome and never went home. He just occasionally sent some money to his family to show that he was still alive. His family did not come to find Ning. Maybe his family thought that General Frost was someone else with the same surname. After all, the name Frost is quite common in France. Now, facing LaSalle's question, Ning shrugged, "It does remind me of my hometown. LaSalle, I saw you had a lot of fun eating fish soup last night." Ning smiled. He hadn't eaten fish for a long time. After all, there is no refrigeration technology now. It is not easy to keep the fish from the sea fresh and transport it to inland areas. Paris and other places also eat river fish, and the taste is not very good. Ning, yes, fish soup, the taste of my hometown, it really reminds me of my childhood. LaSalle, in the future, we can drink fish soup often. There are also Italian delicacies in Italy. I tell you, Italian food is not inferior to French food. In this era, France is synonymous with high-end. Speaking French and eating French food are upper-class behaviors of the upper class. Therefore, the French generally believe that French food is the best in the world. This mentality is a bit similar to the confidence of the Chinese in Chinese food. As a Frenchman, LaSalle began to brag about the food he had eaten in Italy, which is also an outlier. Ning, yes, I'm also looking forward to the Italian food. At this time Napoleon came over on horseback. "Andy, what are you looking at?" "LaSalle, General, you are reminiscing about your hometown. By the way, The other side of the sea should be your hometown, Bonaparte, right? Napoleon's face darkened. Yes, it's my hometown. And Ning glanced at Napoleon and teased. When he was at the Brienne Military Academy, he was clamoring for Corsica's independence all day long. Napoleon smiled awkwardly. I was still a child at that time, and my idol was Polly, the hero of Corsica's independence. LaSalle, then he is not your hero now. No, he hasn't been for a long time. Napoleon smiled, then glanced at Ning. And Ning immediately said, his hero now is Caesar, for sure. Napoleon laughed. Yes, that's right, Caesar. Who doesn't worship Caesar? Andy, don't you do the same? And Ning shook his head. No, I don't worship Caesar. Compared to Caesar, I admire the hero Horatius more. Horatius. The painter David and Beethoven rode over on horseback. He frowned slightly. I remember, it seems to be a hero guarding the bridge. Napoleon, I remember this person. There is only a small paragraph about him in the Heroes of the Romans. What is there to worship about him? And Ning looked back at the Aegean peak more than 40 kilometers away, and then recited the poem Horatius on the Bridge written by the British poet Horatius. The Gay Guardian said, all life in the world will eventually die. In this case, it is of supreme value to die to protect the ashes of our ancestors and the temples of the gods, and to fight against powerful enemies. To protect my mother who doted on me back then, to protect my wife who has been nursing my children until now, to protect the pure girls who will ignite the eternal fire, to protect everyone from the destruction of the shameless villain Sextus. Such a death is so glorious. Your Excellency, Archon, please order the bridge to be demolished. I will fight with my 2 comrades to repel the enemy. There are 1,000 enemy troops occupying the bridge, and we can stop them with just 3 of us. Come on. Which 2 warriors will stand shoulder to shoulder with me to guard the bridge? And Ning recited the poem in full voice, then turned to ask Napoleon, don't you think this kind of fearless spirit of sacrificing oneself for the people of the Republic is very moving? Napoleon, now that you mention it, it is indeed. LaSalle took out his wine flask, bit it with his mouth to unscrew the lid. He was holding a bunch of grapes in his other hand, then raised the wine flask high. Let's toast Horatius. And Ning, drink if you want to. No one will say anything to you. LaSalle laughed, then spit the lid of the flask in his mouth into the hand holding the bunch of grapes, raised his head and drank several mouthfuls. The smell of strong liquor mixed with the sea breeze came to his face. At this time, Berthier also rode up to the hill where Ning was. General, the battle maps have been obtained, and the supplies have been arranged. I plan to leave 1,000 people in Nice to be responsible for the transportation of food and materials. I have also selected the places where military stations need to be set up on the road, and 1,000 people will be left in each place. According to this calculation, we will still have 25,000 people in Savona. Together with the 10,000 people in Savona, we will have 35,000 people to face Beulah's 50,000 people. The good news is that Beulah also needs to disperse troops to defend various places and transfer logistics. I estimate that their field strength is 40,000 to 42,000. And Ning, very good, much better than expected, much better. When can we set off? I plan to rest in Nice for a day and send cavalry to scout the road conditions along the way. Berthier said, most of this road is the sea and coastal hills, and the terrain is complex. And Ning, LaSalle, your first mission is here. LaSalle threw away the grapes that he had not finished eating, and replied while tightening the lid of the wine bottle, okay. I'll set off now. Before the army sets out tomorrow, I will definitely find out the road conditions to Albenga for you. After that, LaSalle turned his horse's head and ran away. Napoleon looked at his leaving figure and smiled. I like this hussar very much. He seems to never have worries. And Ning, yes, he is a likable guy. After all, he was one of the most powerful cavalry officers during the French Revolution. At this time in Paris, the bigwigs of the Girondists were meeting in the lobby of the Girondist Club. Everyone. Brisset said excitedly, according to the news just received, Frost has arrived in Nice and will be kicked out of France soon. The gentlemen of the Girondists all smiled. Italy is just a secondary battlefield, someone said. No matter what he does, he can't get the same reputation as before. Brisset, that's right, and on our side, as long as General Dumouriez wins in the north, he will immediately gain great reputation. By then, we can finally be liberated from the tyranny of this Frost. Everyone nodded repeatedly, and everyone looked happy. We should issue another order to let Dumouriez attack immediately. Chapter 158 All nobles cannot be trusted. After a few days of slow marching along the Mediterranean coast, Ning arrived at Albenga on the Mediterranean coast. As soon as he arrived here, Ning received a report from Savona that an Austrian division appeared on the coastline west of Savona. After a tentative attack, it camped on the mountain north of Varas on the west side. Obviously, the Austrian Marshal Bulow had already taken action. The first thing Ning did when he arrived in Albenga was to order the cavalry to conduct reconnaissance. This area was full of coastal hills and was not very suitable for cavalry to perform, but compared with infantry, the cavalry's advantage in reconnaissance was still incomparable. By the time Ning's large force arrived in Savona, La Salle's hussars had already mastered a lot of intelligence about the enemy. According to intelligence, the 1st Division of the Austrian First Army, led by Austrian Major General Argento, has now arrived in Carcaire, northwest of Savona, a small town between hills, guarding 2 key mountain roads. And Varas was facing the Vukshevich Division of the 2nd Division of the Austrian First Army. As for Marshal Bulow's headquarters, it is speculated that it may be in Cesar. As for the rest of the enemy's troops, La Salle's reconnaissance did not find their position, probably because the mountain roads were difficult to deploy and these troops were still scattered behind. Perhaps Bulow did not expect Ning's troops to arrive so quickly, and thought that Savona was still defended by only those 10,000 men. After arriving in Savona, Ning met the former commander of the Italian corps, the Marquis de Lamballe. Lord Lamballe was a typical aristocrat. The first thing he said after seeing Ning was, "Are you the son of the cobbler?" Upon hearing this, all the officers around Napoleon frowned. Napoleon was not happy at first, and stepped forward and said, "What's wrong with the son of the cobbler? He is a hero who defeated Lafayette's 40,000 men with 15,000. The greatest general of the contemporary era." The Marquis de Lamballe glanced at Napoleon and snorted, "I know, Captain. When did a captain have the right to speak at a meeting between 2 generals?" Ning immediately looked unhappy. That's right, the military ranks of Ning's men were all low, mainly because he hadn't gone to Paris to ask for an official position after winning the battle, so all his men were lieutenants. Ning came up with the idea of a temporary rank and temporarily promoted them, but in order to avoid others talking about it, he didn't make military ranks and uniforms. In the eyes of Ning's troops, Davout was already a lieutenant colonel and Napoleon was a major, but they were still wearing lieutenant uniforms. Anyway, Ning's troops were originally short of officers, and there were not many lieutenants, all of them were sergeants, so Davout and his men were wearing lieutenant uniforms, which was enough to command a fairly large-scale force. But it was not the case for the 10,000 people in Savona. The Marquis of Lamballe was a serious major general, and the standard force commanded by a major general was a division, so this rank was translated as division-level general in some places. But at this time, there was no higher rank in France than major general, and all the higher ranks were honorary ranks, so a major general could also command a corps or even a corps. Before Ning took over as commander of the Italian army, the Marquis of Lamballe served as commander of the Italian army as a major general. In fact, the troops in Savona were just 1 division, and each brigade under the division was led by a colonel. The commanders of the 2 regiments in a brigade were both lieutenant colonels, and there were majors below them. In other words, any major in the Marquis de Lamballe's troops could boss Ning's troops around with his rank. After all, except for him, a major general, the highest-ranking officer in Ning's troops was the colonel of the chief of staff, Berthier, and the ranks of the others were all very low. It was no wonder that the Marquis de Lamballe looked down on Ning so much. After all, he came with a group of colonels, and behind Ning, except for Berthier, the others were all lieutenants. And Ning scratched his head and thought, damn, wouldn't the first problem he encountered when he arrived in Italy be to deal with the Marquis de Lamballe? He was a major general, and the Marquis was also a major general. Although he now had the title of commander of the Italian corps, the Marquis de Lamballe might not obey his orders. Especially now that the Marquis had shown his disdain for Ning. So Ning turned around and ordered Davout, take your division and go to the direction of Carcaire to monitor Argento's troops. Davout saluted, understood. Marquis Lamballe shouted, what? Let a captain command a division? Does he have such ability? I heard that there is a shortage of officers in the country, but I didn't expect it to be so scarce. But General Frost, my troops have enough officers, and my people can command them. And Ning, I am the commander of the Italian corps. The corner of Marquis Lamballe's mouth twitched. And Ning thought to himself, you aristocratic trash, what can you compare with Davout? This is Davout, who led an army of 30,000 people and confronted the main force of Prussia. He is a god. Davout ignored Marcus Lamberval and left with the order. And Ning gave another order, Ms. Oliver, your cavalry will scout in the direction of Varus to contain Vukshevich's troops. As you wish. Ms. Oliver also left. Marcus de Lamberval said angrily, what's the matter? What kind of people are sent from the country? A group of lieutenants and a nanny, led by a leatherworker. Can they fight a war? And Ning, it's okay to call Ms. Oliver an old nanny, which is not much different from the facts, but isn't it inappropriate to call Davout a lieutenant? After all, he is almost Mediterranean. Marcus de Lamberval, war is not a joke. How can you beat Marshal Buell like this? He is a veteran in his 70s and very experienced. And Ning said coldly, I know, I have never looked down on this old marshal. So I have to do something. Lanz stepped forward and responded loudly, here. Lanz is still the commander of the training team, but the size of the training team has been expanded a lot. After all, and Ning is now the commander of a 30,000-man corps. In order to train enough non-commissioned officers to support 30,000 people, the training team was expanded to 500 people and became a training regiment. Lanz is the commander of the training regiment. And Ning, let the training regiment surround this building. Lana, it's already surrounded. After saying that, he shouted, someone come. Immediately, a group of training regiment soldiers rushed into the room. Marcus Lamberval's voice trembled, what do you want to do? And Ning, I heard that your wife, Marcus Lamberval, is the best friend of the traitor Queen Marie? I suspect you are secretly communicating with a foreign country. Arrest her. The soldiers roared in unison, yes. Then two burly soldiers went over and lifted up the Marcus. And Ning continued to order, arrest all the nobles in the former Italian legion. The royal party has rebelled, and all the nobles cannot be trusted. At the same time, in the former Italian legion, imitate the system of our army and establish a soldier committee, let the soldiers elect their sergeants. Chapter 159 Vukshevich's sudden attack. Austrian Marshal Buell did not underestimate the new Italian corps led by General Frost. Before the declaration of war, he had already spread out his spies, and after the declaration of war, he hired many Italians to gather intelligence for him. Now, the old marshal basically grasped the number of enemies and the composition of their commanders. Now, the marshal summoned his staff and held a meeting. The marshal's chief of staff, Condor, said to Frost's troops who came over very unconcernedly, this is just a group of rabble. Frost's officers are all a group of green hands who haven't even grown all their hair. He actually let a captain lead a division. A captain. Here, even the regiment commander is a major or even a lieutenant colonel. The other officers of the headquarters, including Brigadier General Bottendorf, the commander of the Bottendorf division, who served as the general reserve, all nodded repeatedly. The marshal shook his head. He led such a force to defeat Lafayette. I met Lafayette once. He is an outstanding officer and understands what war is all about. He defeated Cornwallis in the New World. The officers looked at each other in bewilderment. At this time, Major General Vukshevich, who had rushed back to attend the meeting, teased, maybe General Lafayette is just like you. Because the opponent is full of low-ranking officers, he looked down on the opponent, so he lost. Condor, what do you mean? It means literally. Vukshevich still had a mocking tone. There are also different types of noble officers. Some of them are purely based on their family. There are many such people in Austria and France. Such people generally don't like those officers who do practical things. This can be said to be the norm in the European army. Vukshevich couldn't stand Condor's fancy clothes. Seeing that the officers were about to quarrel, Marshal Buell spoke, okay. Everyone should work together. Vukshevich is right. Lafayette was probably defeated because he looked down on Frost. We must pay attention to him and treat him and his men as perfectly trained and qualified officers and soldiers. Only in this way can we ensure that nothing goes wrong. Vukshevich nodded, of course, I have never underestimated him. After today's confrontation, I think my frontal enemy is still the original Italian Legion, that is, General Lamberval's troops. How did you tell? Condor asked. Of course, I looked at the number of colonels. The noble officers dress like roosters on the battlefield, which is very easy to identify. Condor looked down at his clothes. He was wearing an Austrian white general's dress, with a pair of shiny gold epaulets on his shoulders, and the tassels were long enough to brush horses. The tassels were made by the most famous tailor in Vienna, with solid materials and fine stitches. Under the tassels were fancy medals and ribbons. Vukcevich, yes, that's it. Kondor immediately blew his carefully trimmed beard. Vukcevich, and the beard. Only a noble with 2 orderly soldiers can maintain such a beautiful beard on the battlefield. Marshal Beulah said, okay. I know that the enemy in front of you is the original enemy. At this time, a captain entered the headquarters and saluted. Report. The scouting hussars are back, saying that they have captured the French officers who came to surrender. All the officers in the headquarters stood up immediately. The old marshal was a step slower and stood up. What? Hurry, bring him in. A moment later, several French officers were brought in. Vukcevich spoke first. Where are your tricolor emblems? The leading officer spat. Fuck the tricolor emblem, long live the king. The remaining French officers also shouted together. The Austrian officers all showed joy. But Beulah still had a stern face. The old man stepped forward. Don't shout. Start from the beginning. What's going on? Come on, give him a glass of water. The water was immediately handed over. The French officer who first shouted long live the king took the water, drank it, and then he let out a long sigh. That damn frost. As soon as his army arrived, he immediately said that all officers were potential traitors, and directly ordered his guards, called the training corps, to start arresting officers. All those who were of noble birth were arrested. Can you imagine? As long as they were of noble birth, they were all arrested. Kondor was overjoyed. What? In other words, now in the original Italian Legion, the only officers left are warrant officers, and all those above warrant officers have been dismissed? The French system stipulates that only 3 generations of hereditary nobles can become colonels. This is also because France is the most feudal country in Europe. Since the time of Louis XIV, a large number of nobles have been accumulated. If this rule is not set, there will be too many colonels. People of common origin can only climb to warrant officer in the French army. It is very rare to be promoted to second lieutenant. Generally, they have made great contributions or someone in their family married a daughter of a poor noble family. Without such external factors, a commoner can only be a warrant officer at most through ordinary promotion. As an Austrian nobleman, Kondor is of course familiar with the French system. After all, France was a model for other countries to learn in the feudal era, and nobles from all countries basically spoke French. The status of French in Europe at this time is somewhat similar to the status of English in the world after the establishment of Anglo-Saxon hegemony. Kondor was very excited. In other words, the enemy in front of Vukcevich is also in chaos now. The fleeing French officer nodded. I came from there and abandoned my troops. Fortunately, our station is quite far from Savona, otherwise I can't run away at all. That frost sent a pipe-smoking devil to hunt down the nobles who ran out of Savona. The captured nobles were still alive, but those who escaped were basically hacked to death. Kondor turned to Bolu. We should attack immediately. If we set out now, after marching all night, we can launch the attack at dawn. At this time, Kondor suggested marching all night, which showed that he was very confident in the training level and organization of the troops. However, Marshal Bolu was experienced and knew that marching at night would cause a large number of people to fall behind, and a special reception team needed to be organized. Even a well-organized army must regroup after the night march. And the night battle must be a mess. After entering the night battle, who can win basically depends on which side is more brave and has better luck. The conventional surprise attack tactics of this era is to march quickly at night, and then after a little reorganization at dawn, take advantage of the enemy's night watch when the people are most tired to attack. This kind of assault is dangerous to execute. If you don't win, the troops who have been running all night will be chased by the energetic enemy. Bolu stroked his beard, pondered for a while, and then said, this opportunity cannot be missed. Vukcevich, lead your division, set out tonight, and attack Varese at dawn tomorrow. Chapter 160, The Raid on Varese. The next morning, Varese, a seaside town 10 kilometers from Savona, was still asleep. Yesterday, La Salle's cavalry rushed over, tied up all the noble officers in the town, and locked them in the cellar of the town's big grain merchant. The command of the entire army fell on the few remaining civilian warrant officers. Among this group of warrant officers, there was one who was of Italian descent and could speak fluent Italian. At this moment, he was greeting the fishermen who were preparing to go out to sea to fish early in the morning. The warrant officer had worked as a waiter on a merchant ship and occasionally worked as a sailor, so he was quite familiar with life on the Mediterranean Sea and could find topics to talk about with the fisherman. So, the fisherman suddenly asked after chatting for a while, "I heard that you became the commander of this brigade here yesterday." The 34-year-old warrant officer nodded. "Yes, I don't know why. Yesterday, the guy named Pipe Smoker came and said that the nobles were traitors and could not be trusted, so he tied them all up and locked them in the cellar." Then the Pipe Smoker shouted everywhere, "Who is Messina?" "Andre Messina from Nice." I said, "If it is limited to Nice, then it must be me." Then guess what? The Pipe Smoker asked me as if to confirm something. "You are Italian, right?" I responded to him in Italian, so I became the brigade commander. A day ago, I was still a warrant officer guide. The fisherman laughed, then put down the fishing line he was sorting, came over and said to Messina mysteriously, "The new commander has a great reputation. The legend about him has been passed on more than a year ago. It is said that he has a list given to him by God, and it is full of the world's generals." "Messina, is there such a saying?" "Yes. It's said in the newspapers in Nice. He was able to defeat Lafayette a year ago because he made an exception and selected several capable people according to this list." Messina raised his eyebrows and was about to ask for more details when suddenly there was a deafening shout of killing in the distance. Messina was shocked and shouted to the fisherman, "Go out to sea. Don't get close to the shore." Then he turned and ran towards the headquarters. At this time, gunshots rang out, and crackling gunshots rang out in the northwest of the town. Messina listened to the sound and felt that the enemy should have come down from the mountain road leading to San Martino, so he ran while shouting, "The enemy is coming down from San Martino. Everyone go northwest. Stab anyone in white clothes." The soldiers who had originally run out of their accommodation in panic, immediately turned around and ran northwest upon hearing this. Messina grabbed a sergeant by the collar and shouted to him, "Run along the street, shouting 'Run to the northwest, and stab anyone in white clothes if you see them.'" The sergeant nodded, turned around and started running along the street, shouting as he ran. At this time, Messina saw LaSalle, who also lived in Verres last night, running out of a private house while pulling up his trousers. "Messina, Captain. Your cavalry, assemble your cavalry. The main road of the town is a straight line, which is very suitable for cavalry charges. If the enemy rushes to the main road, it will depend on you." LaSalle, "Okay. Leave it to me," he said as he felt on his body. "Where is my pipe?" Messina ignored him and continued to run towards the headquarters. When he arrived in front of the headquarters, he saw a group of soldiers gathered in front of the door doing nothing. Messina suddenly rushed to a standard-bearer who was still asleep, picked up the flag, jumped onto a flower bed, and shouted at the top of his voice, "Soldiers! Follow me! Follow the flag! For the country! Go! Fuck the king, follow me!" Messina was going to shout for the king out of habit. After all, the kingdom had been in existence for hundreds of years, and habits become second nature. Then he realized that the noble officers had just been arrested for having an affair with the king, so it was obviously wrong to shout for the king. But Messina didn't know what France was like now, and what he should fight for, so he could only curse and say, "A general, follow me." At this time, the soldiers were at a loss. If someone came out to take the lead, it would directly change the entire direction of the wind. So the soldiers roared, followed the flag carried by Messina, and rushed to the northwest of the town. They met the Austrian army that was about to enter the town. The blue uniforms that had been blocking the Austrians were about to retreat, and many of them turned around and ran away. As a result, when they saw a large group of people rushing towards them following Messina's flag, they immediately regained their courage. While Messina was fighting, LaSalle finally found his pipe from his mistress's arms, and then he rode out of the city with dozens of cavalrymen. These were all the cavalry he could muster. The hundreds of cavalry he brought to the town yesterday disappeared in the chaos. LaSalle led the cavalry to a small hill, then looked at the town with his hands on his back. "Damn it, he even asked me to charge from the town avenue. Does he understand cavalry?" LaSalle cursed, "At a time like this, of course we have to outflank the enemy and kick their asses." "Trumpeter. Report, no trumpeter." A knight shouted. "LaSalle, fuck. Forget it, just follow me and whistle like Alexander's cavalry, understand?" As he said this, LaSalle whipped his horse, causing it to spring to action. Then he controlled the frightened horse and cut diagonally along the slope towards the white Austrian army. The hussars were all brave and aggressive guys. When they saw the leader was on the scene, They immediately followed, fearing that they would be late and miss the battle. Lasalle drew his saber and issued what he called Alexander's whistle, alia. Just a few dozen riders rushed out with the same prestige as the conqueror king. The enemy army, which had been attacking all night, was suddenly attacked from behind and immediately fell into chaos. If a Ning was present, he would describe the scene like this: it was a waste, the enemy was wiped out. Vukcevich used a telescope to observe the two regiments he was rushing down. Due to the terrain, he could not deploy too many troops at once. The rest of his division was lined up on the hillside. Okay, blow the signal and let the two regiments retreat. The raid has failed, and the next step is a real fight. Vukcevich was astonished. He knew that his troops had marched all night for the surprise attack without any artillery. When the enemy restored their outer positions, arranged their artillery and began to bombard, it would be almost time for him to retreat. Without artillery, fighting against those with artillery, even a fool would know which side would win. It was not that Vukcevich did not want to bring artillery, but it was mainly at night and on mountain roads. The Austrian artillery was still heavy infantry artillery and lacked a mobile and flexible cavalry artillery like the French. It was impossible for the artillery to keep up with the Austrian troops in the surprise attack. This was another major reason why Marshal Bulow was so hesitant to launch a surprise attack. You can't bring artillery in a surprise attack. Vukcevich, wait until the two retreating regiments gather together, and then begin to cover each other and retreat in an orderly manner. After 3 hours of bloody battles, the enemy troops outside Lavais finally retreated. Messina stood on the newly restored artillery position outside the city, observing the tail of the Austrian army. At this time, Lasalle rode over and said to Messina excitedly, "It was really awesome today. I killed at least 40 people, 40. My knife is all bent. Look. This is not because of my poor knife skills. With my skills, I can kill 10 people and the blade is as good as new." Messina said seriously, "The enemy retreated in a very orderly manner. Do you understand? Retreat is the time to test the ability of a general. Vukcevich is a very strong general." Lasalle smiled, "I understand you. You still want to fight him again, right?" "What?" Messina looked at Lasalle in confusion. "Look at you, your clenched fists are twitching. This is excitement. Do you understand? Excitement." Lasalle smiled and patted Messina on the shoulder. "You are also a person born for war. Finally I know why the boss chose you." Chapter 161 An ordinary morning. That morning, the first thing Ning did when he got up was to ask, "Has Lasalle come back?" After he dealt with the Marquis of Lamballe and a group of officers yesterday, he looked for Messina everywhere, but he did not find anyone with this name among the garrisons in Savona, so he could only pin his hopes on the troops stationed in Varese. He sent Lasalle to Varese to arrest the officers and find out if there was an Italian named Messina there. If he found one, he would be directly appointed as the brigade commander. As a result, Lasalle set out last night and then lost contact. He did not send anyone back to report all night. However, considering Lasalle's personality, it was normal that no one came back to report. In the future, when Lasalle was sent out to work, he would always remind him to report in time. But the reminder may not be useful. Maybe this guy got drunk and threw the reminder behind his mind. In short, until this morning, Ning still didn't know whether he had found Messina. To do this, he had to be prepared and send a reliable person to lead the brigade in Varese. But Ning was short of people now. Davout already led a division, and Lannes was still learning how to fight. After all, he had just become a soldier from a dyeing workshop apprentice a year ago. This was different from the time when Napoleon began to use Lannes in history. At that time in history, Lannes had been fighting in the Great Revolutionary War for several years. Although he had not undergone standard military training, he had gained experience by fighting. Ning would not let Lannes be the brigade commander at this time, and he had to lead the teaching regiment to experience more battles. Then Ning really had no officers. Ning now had 2 divisions under his name, and each division was overstaffed because of the lack of officers. The first division was led by Davout, and Ning originally wanted to give the second division to Napoleon, but he was reluctant to give up such a fierce artillery officer as Napoleon. If Napoleon was sent to lead the troops, the direct artillery column would have to be commanded by Ning himself. Finally, the second division was handed over to a warrant officer brought by Berthier. According to Berthier, this guy named Laharpe was a talented leader. and Ning vaguely remembered that there was also a general named Laharp in the Napoleon Wars, but he was not familiar with this person and didn't know if it was the same person. As for military rank, it was only 1792, and there were still 4 years before the beginning of the Napoleon Wars. Due to the situation, the French Revolution had no ceiling for the promotion of officers, and emphasized that anyone with ability would be promoted, so the powerful generals were promoted quickly. In short, Ning followed Berthier's advice and handed the 2nd Division to Laharp, who was not sure if he was the original person in history. Since he was recommended by Berthier, he should not be too bad. As for the 10,000 people who have been recruited now, in theory, they should form a new division. Ning was going to promote him on the spot if he found Messina, but now he can't be found anywhere, so Ning must start considering the candidate for the new division commander. If it doesn't work, it can only be handed over to Napoleon. Napoleon would have no problem commanding a division, and maybe he would feel his destiny in a certain battle and put history back on the right track. At that time, Ning would definitely make a bad move and hold on to Napoleon's thigh. But in the current situation, this is probably impossible. Alice, I haven't made a bad move for more than a year, and I am busy all the time. I am not as free as before. When can I relax? Ning was thinking about it, and the messenger came. Report. Ning, come in. Did LaSalle find Messina? The messenger hesitated for a moment. No. General, this is a report from Commander Davout. The Argento division in front of him seems to be going down the mountain this morning. General Davout. Captain, prepare to deploy to meet him. The messenger might have been a messenger in the army before. He usually helped the general to convey orders and messages. He almost said the wrong thing and forced himself to change his words halfway. Ning, next time I go to Paris, I will definitely promote my officers. Berthier, just promote officers. Ning, yes, what else can I do? Berthier shrugged, I dare not say anything unless you tell me. Ning, well, let's focus on the battle situation. Davout has started the fight. Where's the location? The messenger immediately pointed to a point on the map. Here. Mount Nicino. Berthier immediately put a mark on it, and then placed the sign representing the Argento division next to the mark representing the battlefield, opposite to the mark of Davout's division. Ning, Davout has 12,000 men, which should be enough to deal with the Argento division. Berthier, according to the intelligence from the reconnaissance, Mount Nicino cannot deploy more troops. 1 division is enough. Ning pointed to another road leading to the mountains. Where does this road lead to? Can we go around behind the Argento division? Yes, go up the mountain from here, reach Alter and turn north, and go along the river valley to reach Mononet behind the Argento division. In addition, from here to the west, you can reach Austria's stronghold Carcaire. Ning touched his chin and looked at the map. Period. He had completely remembered at this time that this area was the place where Napoleon's first battle after entering Italy was in Napoleon's biography. At that time, Napoleon used a group of Italian corps troops with low morale and lack of supplies to defeat the coalition forces of Austria and the Kingdom of Sardinia. Although the Kingdom of Sardinia is not participating in the war now, it is completely feasible to copy the first phase of the battle. After all, the terrain is the same. Ning, I now order Laharp to lead his men to climb the mountain from the side road immediately, advance at the fastest speed, and strive to reach Mononet before nightfall tonight. Order Davout to keep fighting with the enemy and attract the enemy firmly to the front. As Ning spoke, Berthier wrote orders quickly. After writing one, he shouted to Laharp and handed the order to the messenger who came to meet him. The first messenger ran away, and Berthier lowered his head to write the second order, while another messenger replaced the previous one and waited for the new order to be finished. To Davout. Berthier finally stopped writing and shouted, so the messenger came up without saying a word and took the order and left. After issuing the 2 orders, Berthier continued to issue several orders, all of which were to adjust logistics and local defenses, and clearly arrange the defense around the headquarters after Laharp's division left. Ning watched with satisfaction as Berthier transformed his strategic intentions into practical orders. He suddenly thought of the scene in the movie Armageddon where 101 gave orders at the train station. Is this what it feels like to have a capable chief of staff? It's great. At this time, Berthier looked up and said, should we also ask the artillery to go and help the Davout division? Ning, sure, let Napoleon go hiking as well. If all goes well, he can be used in the battle to attack Mononet tonight. Berthier immediately began to write orders. Ning raised his eyebrows. thinking that Berthier knew how to behave. He knew that although Napoleon was only a captain, he was my confidant, so he did not give orders directly, but consulted me first. At this time, the sound of troops assembling outside the headquarters came. It should be Laharpe preparing to set off. At this moment, another messenger ran in. Report. The report from Varese: the enemy's Vukshevich division is attacking Varese, and fierce fighting is underway. Berthier frowned, and immediately turned to Ning and said, Varese has only one brigade, which is the original Italian Legion's troops. They have just been equipped with noble officers. Will they be defeated directly? And Ning, it is possible. Berthier, should we send the troops of the original Italian Legion to support Varese? The officers can be selected from the Knights of Yuhu. And Ning, no, the people of the original Italian Legion are still in chaos. It is useless to drag them onto the battlefield rashly. Let Lana and his teaching regiment be responsible for organizing the soldiers to form a committee and elect their trusted sergeants to lead them. They will not be used before the reorganization is completed. What about Varese? And Ning thought for a while. Order the Yuhu Knights and the Women's Cavalry Regiment to assemble, and I will take these troops there. Berthier, the enemy has at least one division, 7 or 8,000 people. It may not be enough to lead only the Yuhu Knights and ladies. The terrain at the seaside is not suitable for cavalry charge. And Ning, if it is not enough, I will set up a battle array on the spot to delay the enemy, and you will lead the reorganized troops to rush to the rescue. He paused, shook his head and said, don't worry, the report from Davout is just preparation for battle, and the report from Varese has already started, which means that the enemy may have launched a surprise attack in the morning after marching all night, and the enemy may not have cannons. Our army stationed in Varese has cannons. Berthier was still worried. The enemy defeated our army in Varese and seized the cannons. What should we do? And Ning was about to answer, and suddenly someone shouted outside, I'm back. It's LaSalle. He should have been in Varese last night. Go find him and ask about the situation. And Ning said happily. At this time, LaSalle came in with a pipe. General, we defeated the enemy's surprise attack. And, let me tell you, I found the Messina you asked me to find. He is a fierce man, very fierce. Without him this morning, I might have had to run back in a panic. What? And Ning was shocked. Messina was found? Where is he? LaSalle, he thought the enemy might attack again, so he stayed in Varese to strengthen the defense. And Ning, please ask him to come over. No, he has to command the defense. I should go to his side. Julian, bring my horse. And Ning rubbed his hands excitedly. Look at my luck. I found another fierce general. This card drawing is so lucky. I thought I had finally won this time. Messina is still a small vendor and has not joined the army yet. I have Davout in my left hand and Messina in my right hand. What else can stop me in this Italy? The answer is nothing. Awesome. Just when Ning was excited, Fanny came in with his breakfast. It's time to eat. And Ning, no, the military situation is urgent. I knew it, so I prepared something that I can eat while writing. Fanny said. And Ning, really? That's great. At this time Julian came in and said, Captain, the horses are ready. And Ning picked up the bread and sausages on the tray and walked out while eating. Chapter 162, Davout's attack. As soon as Ning walked out of the headquarters gate, he ran into Beethoven and David. It's strange to say, this musician and painter became close friends for some reason and acted together all day. As soon as they saw Ning, they greeted him and asked excitedly, is the front line tight? Are you going to the front line now? Please let us go together. And Ning, no, I'm going to Varese now. I found Messina, who I asked them to find before. Beethoven asked puzzledly, why are you looking for this Messina? Does he have any outstanding deeds? And Ning grinned and showed a mysterious smile. In fact, as early as a year ago, when Ning made the list for Lazare Carnot, who was not at the front line, there were rumors that Ning had received a revelation from God. And Ning was worried that there would be problems with making this list. He had no choice at the time. It was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack to find those people by himself, so he made a list. But now he found that there was no problem at all, and it increased his legendary attributes. Beethoven was the only one who asked the question directly to his face. Maybe the music saint was a little special and was not affected by the rumors that Ning had spread. Anyway, things were like this, and Ning was too lazy to explain in detail. At first, he was still worried. What if these people were not as fierce as the legend said? Then when fighting Lafayette last year, The performance of Davu and Lands dispelled his doubts. Especially Davu, who had solid military knowledge and bravery in combat, was a fierce general like the legend in history. In other words, Lands was really too young and really didn't understand military affairs. He still needed to learn, otherwise Ning would have thrown him out to command a division. As for Messina is only a warrant officer now, but after all, he has been a soldier for so many years, so he should be of great use. The battle this morning also proved this point. Messina was indeed very fierce, as Lascelles witnessed with his own eyes. So Ning was determined to appoint Messina as the division commander. And Ning said to Beethoven and David, "It's fine if you two want to come with us. If you want to go to the battlefield, you can find Napoleon. His artillery should be leaving for the front battlefield soon. David, we'd better follow you. It's a good opportunity to meet Messina, whom you've been thinking about all the time." Lascelles interrupted and said, "Oh my God, you must draw this Messina. I saw it with my own eyes. The Austrians attacked at dawn, and Messina personally held up the flag to counterattack, and pushed them back out of the town. If it wasn't for him, I would have been captured. Then I found dozens of cavalrymen, rode out of the town, and charged at the Austrians from behind." Beethoven smiled and said, "From what you said, it was your credit that we won in the end. Of course, this, Messina and I each contributed half." And Ning was already on his horse at this time. While eating a hot dog, he said, "You can only believe half of what he says, especially when he smells of alcohol. You're right. When I was scouting the enemy, you must not believe half of it. I must have obtained 100% accurate enemy information at that time." And Ning smiled, and then urged Beethoven and David, "If you two are willing to come, hurry up. Right away, General." At this time, Davu was commanding his troops on the top of Mount Nakino to fight against the Argento division. He analyzed the terrain of the mountain and thought that he should not copy General Frost's reverse slope tactics, but instead line up on the top of the mountain, so the Austrian artillery could hit Davu's troops. However, last night Davu ordered the troops to repair some fortifications before staying overnight, so the casualties caused by the artillery were not great. The 4 artillery pieces of Davu's troops, relying on the advantage of being high above, bombarded the Austrians more fiercely. When the Austrian infantry came up, Davu's formation took effect. The enemy was attacking from above, which consumed a lot of physical strength, and the momentum of the charge was also weakened, so they were beaten back several times in a row. While the enemy was reorganizing their attack, Davu ordered the troops waiting on the back slope to replace the exhausted troops who had resisted several waves of attacks. The change of guard was completed quickly. The Austrians could only stare blankly, because Davu was on the mountain. Even if the Austrians wanted to take advantage of the chaos of Davu's change of guard to rush, they would need time to climb the mountain. When the Austrians charged for the 5th time, Davu received Frost's order, "Nail down the Argento division in front of you and suck it in." After seeing the order, Davu muttered, "It seems that the commander asked other troops to go around, otherwise the order cannot be explained." The adjutant next to him asked, "Are we charging?" Davu shook his head, No. If we charge down and the enemy is defeated, we will not be able to complete the mission. Damn it, the order is late. If it came earlier, I would not have changed guard, and the enemy would think that we only have so few people." The messenger was about to return to the headquarters to report that the order had been conveyed. When he heard Davu's words, he turned back and said pitifully, "I'm running as hard as I can, but the mountain road is really difficult to walk on. I dare not run even on a horse. Davu, I know, I'm not blaming you. Now we can only hope that the Austrians are determined enough to conquer this mountain. You go back and report. Do you need me to bring a battle report? Just tell the commander that everything is fine, and I promise to complete the mission." After Davu finished speaking, the messenger saluted and ran away. If he didn't go back, the headquarters would see that he had been gone for too long and would think that something went wrong during the delivery. They would send another messenger and several armed cavalry guards to deliver the message. As soon as the messenger was sent away, the lookout shouted, "Divisional commander, look!" Davu immediately opened the telescope to observe the changes in the enemy's formation. He soon came to the conclusion, "Damn it, the enemy has discovered that we have a strong force, and they are trying to escape. In this era, after defeating the enemy may run to the rear and reorganize. In this era, whether it is a bayonet or a smoothbore rifle, the killing efficiency is not that high, so after defeating the enemy, The enemy's troops may run back as high as 70% to 80%, and they can fight again after reorganizing. To completely invalidate the opponent's troops, it is necessary to completely eliminate the opponent's organization, seize the army's flag, and snatch all the roster of the troops and the officer roster and burn them. In this way, even if the enemy finally runs back, it will take several months to reorganize. In addition, there was another practice in this era, that is, the captured officers had to make an agreement that they would not fight against our army again within 1 year. Although this agreement has no coercive force, people in Europe often abide by this agreement. Later, when Napoleon arrived in Egypt, he did the same to the Ottoman army. As a result, they agreed and were released. They turned around and joined the Ottoman army to continue fighting the French army. So Napoleon had no choice but to kill the surrendered Ottoman army prisoners. In short, only by breaking up the enemy's organization on a large scale and capturing the enemy's troops can the enemy be reduced in number and unable to be replenished in a short time. It is not enough to just defeat. Davout was not calm when he saw the enemy begin to retreat. He thought about it and said, "Let's start advancing now." "Charge." "No." Davout said loudly, "If you don't charge, you will advance towards the enemy, then stop and shoot, maintain contact, and don't let the enemy run away smoothly." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163 Monument Assault. Napoleon led the cavalry artillery troops to climb the mountain for a long time, and finally saw Mount Nicino in front of them, but there was no sound of fighting at all. Napoleon used a telescope to observe the top of the mountain in confusion, and then found that there was no Davout on the mountain, only some troops cleaning the battlefield. There was a medical clinic on the hillside. Napoleon was curious, so he asked the troops to continue along the mountain road, and he rode up the hillside and came to the medical clinic. There were wailing everywhere in the medical clinic. But Napoleon soon discovered that there were not many French wounded soldiers here, all of them were Austrian wounded soldiers in white clothes. Suddenly, a high-pitched Italian curse came from the medical clinic. "What are you doing, you pig? Are you torturing me on purpose?" Napoleon jumped off his horse, walked over curiously, and then found an Austrian lieutenant colonel cursing and driving away the nurse who was washing his wounds. The nurse was troubled because she didn't understand Italian. Napoleon spoke up. "He's going to wash your wound with wine. Our general thinks it will be good for the wound." The Austrian officer turned his head and looked at Napoleon. "Corsicans? Huh? Corsicans have become French pigs." Napoleon's Italian has a strong Corsican accent, and northern Italians look down on Corsicans, just like they look down on southern Italians. Northern Italians are rich and look down on poor guys who also speak Italian. "Napoleon, let him wash your wound." "I won't." The Italian roared. "My wound has become festering, don't you understand? Festering means that everything is going in a good direction. Soon I will have a fever, and then I will be fine." This is one of the many ignorant cognitions of this era. People of this era did not know the existence of microorganisms, so they did not understand the mechanism of wound infection. They believed that the festering and edema caused by wound infection were evidence that the body was recovering, and the same was true for the high fever caused by infection. They would even smear the wound with burnt ashes because the wound was too clean and did not fester, causing the wound to become infected and fester, which in turn caused the person to have a fever. So although the killing efficiency of bayonets and smoothbore guns was very low in this era, some very minor injuries, such as skin scrapes by bayonets, would cause serious injuries that would cause combat casualties, and the person would have a high fever for many days at any time. In this case, if a Ning could rub penicillin by hand, the survival rate of the wounded would be greatly improved immediately, but unfortunately, Ning did not know how to do this. He could only ask Laser Carnot to prepare a lot of high-strength alcohol and force the military doctors of the troops to wash the wounds with alcohol to keep the wounds clean. Many doctors protested to him for this. Obviously, this Austrian officer of Italian origin also believed that washing wounds with strong alcohol was an abuse and torture of the French army against captured personnel. Napoleon patiently persuaded him in Italian, but the other party not only disagreed, but his voice became louder and louder. Finally, Napoleon got annoyed and slapped the other man in the face. "Damn it, that's right, it's abuse. Just accept it. Although Napoleon was not tall, he was a professional soldier after all, and his body was very well trained. His arms were strong and powerful. This slap directly made the other man's head crooked. Damn it, my father didn't hit me. The Italian roared. Napoleon slapped him again. The Italian finally kept silent. Napoleon, wash his wound. Everything is in accordance with the order of the general. While the nurse was doing it, Napoleon looked around for the military doctor of the clinic. Where's the military doctor? Where is the military doctor? The military doctor came out of the next tent, holding a saw in his bloody hand. There was no way to treat infection in this era, but they finally realized that the decay of the wound would kill people, so they would often saw off the limbs that began to decay. Yes, the most important treatment method in the field medical clinic in this era was amputation. Doctors may not know how to cure people, but they must be very good at sawing bones. Doctor, who is looking for me? I am Napoleon Bonaparte. Where is Davout? Doctor, he is chasing the enemy towards Montagnat. It seems that the order given by the general was to stick to the enemy, but when the order was passed, the enemy had already started to slip away, so Commander Davout led his troops to chase them. Napoleon, how many hours has he been walking? Almost 2 hours. Napoleon cursed, turned and rushed out of the tent, jumped on his horse, and urged the horse to run down the hillside. His troops were still advancing along the mountain road, and Napoleon shouted, "Speed up! Davout has been walking for 2 hours. We must catch up with him before he reaches Montagnat." Davout was anxious at this time because the enemy retreated too fast. He once wanted to go around the enemy to intercept him, but there were too many mountains around, so it was impossible to do so. As for the charge, Davout always felt that as long as his troops charged up and fought in close combat, they would soon be able to defeat the enemy. After the enemy fled, there was no way to completely encircle and annihilate the enemy and destroy their organization. At this time, Davout could already see the town of Montagnat in the distance. Davout cursed, "It seems that the expectation of destroying the enemy in an organized manner cannot be achieved. Military band, beat the charge drum." Military band, understood, charge drum. Immediately, the urgent drum beats sounded. The musicians of each battalion heard that the commander had changed the drum beats, and they immediately changed the drum beats. Hearing the drum beats, the non-commissioned officers ordered one after another, "Everyone, charge!" Davout's troops rushed towards the enemy troops along the river valley like blue waves. Major General Argento, the Austrian division commander, frowned. "No, this guy has been following us and shooting, and now he suddenly charges. There must be something strange about this." He turned his head and glanced at Montagnat, who was right behind him, and suddenly gasped, "Oh my God! That's it! Their goal is to capture Montagnat and then make us a dumpling." Brits. Soon a lieutenant colonel ran up to him. "General, led the reserve regiment to counterattack the enemy in front." "Understood, General." Just as Brits was about to turn around, Argento stopped him. "Take care, Lieutenant Colonel." Brits understood immediately and nodded. "Thank you, General, for giving me this honor." After that, he drew his sword and left in a hurry. Argento continued to order the entire army to stop alternating cover, the front team becomes the rear team, and run forward. Run as fast as you can. The bugler immediately blew the melody of changing formations. Although the Austrian army was in a panic, they still completed the formation changes in a well-trained manner. At this moment, shouts of killing came from the back of the team, and the reserve team began to charge. "Argento, quick, retreat. Retreat past Montagnat." At this moment, a horn sounded on the west side of the battlefield. The tricolor flag appeared on the mountain road west of Montagnat. Chapter 164, Fierce Battle. Ladharpe saw the town of Montagnat through his telescope. The sound of fighting came from the southeast, and it sounded like it was very close. Ladharpe made a quick decision. "Vanguard, start the siege immediately, don't wait for the cannon." The messenger immediately ran out. Ladharpe continued to urge the troops around him, "Keep up the momentum. I know you are all very tired." Ladharpe's troops took another longer road, went around Alter, and then turned a corner and ran along the river valley to Montagnat. This road was much longer than the distance that Davout's troops marched yesterday and today combined. Ladharpe's soldiers were exhausted, but fortunately, their morale was very high and they were ready to fight. There were shouts of killing from the vanguard direction, and Ladharpe immediately stopped observing the soldiers around him and turned the telescope to Montagnat. He saw the vanguard troops charging along the river valley and then being shot at by the Montagnat defense troops. Montagnat did not have anything that could be called a wall, only a low wall. The remaining enemy troops defended behind the low wall and fired desperately at a blue army that rushed up. The white smoke produced by the firing of flintlock rifles formed strange clouds in the valley, which were pushed to the leeward direction by the wind blowing along the valley. After the enemy fired 2 rounds of volleys, Ladharp's vanguard rushed to the low wall. The hand-to-hand combat began. Ladharp suddenly saw a group of enemies rushing southeast of Montagnat and rushing into the city from the other side. The enemy in front arrived so quickly? It's so close! Ladharp exclaimed, and then turned the telescope to observe the hillside on the east side of the valley. It seems that although this hillside cannot be deployed in a regular line infantry formation, it can be climbed up in a skirmish formation. So Ladharp immediately ordered all battalions of the 3rd Brigade, climb up the mountain in a skirmish formation. Shoot the enemy from the side. The Ladharp division in the valley immediately changed its formation. The people of the 3rd Brigade turned around and formed a loose formation, and began to climb up the mountain in a wild way. At this time, the 2nd group of enemy troops rushed into Montagnat under Ladharp's watch. The battle situation in the direction of the low wall became confusing. The first group of troops entering the city obviously quickly supported the defensive troops there. In Ladharp's telescope, the white and blue clothes were completely mixed together, in a mess. Ladharp, 2nd Brigade, keep investing. Don't stop. We have the advantage in numbers. At this time, one of Ladharp's staff said, Division Commander, you should shout for the general. Ladharp hesitated for a moment, and finally decided to adopt the advice of the staff. He drew his sword and shouted, for the general. The next moment, the troops burst into a majestic shout, responding to Ladharp's call. At this time, the 3rd Brigade in the skirmish formation finally climbed to the top of the hill and began to fire at the enemy on the other side of the hill who were advancing along the southeast road. Ladharp muttered, Damn it, it's a pity that we ran too fast and the artillery couldn't keep up. If we push the artillery up the hill, how much damage can be done? Davout saw Ladharp's scattered soldiers appear on the side of the ridge and cheered loudly. In fact, at this time, Davout's troops had artillery, but he couldn't find a good position to deploy the artillery. Davout, if Ladharp rushes down from the mountain, at least half of the enemy can be dispersed. But Ladharp's troops only formed a loose formation on the top of the hill and fired at the enemy on the mountain road on the enemy's side. Although the distance is a bit far, because the enemies are crowded together and forced to march, the hit rate should still be quite good. Davout was furious, and he immediately called the messenger, You, go over the mountain, find Ladharp, and let him charge. The messenger responded and left. Davout had given up the plan to annihilate the enemy at this time. If he charged now and attacked from both sides, he could defeat a large number of enemies. In this way, the enemy will have a large number of troops that cannot be organized for a few days and must retreat for a period of time. But Ladharp obviously didn't know the situation here. He was still thinking about completing Frost's intention and completely eating up the Argento division. Davout also knew that the problem must be here. He paced back and forth, constantly ravaging his shiny forehead. Damn it! This Ladharp, why doesn't he climb up the hill to observe it himself? The current situation can be said to be not optimistic. Davout's large force was blocked on the road by the Austrian army that was counterattacking with a disparate state. Although they had an advantage in numbers, they could not deploy their formation at all. The Austrian army was rushing towards Montagnat. What Davout needed most at this time was actually a radio. By relying on the radio to inform Ladharp of the situation on the other side, he might be able to seize the opportunity to launch a flank attack and defeat most of Argento's troops. Unfortunately, there was no such convenient thing at this time. The transmission of orders and intelligence depended entirely on the messenger running at full speed. Even if Davout rubbed his bald head until it could be used as a mirror, he couldn't find a way out. While Davout and Ladharp were in a stalemate at Montagnat, the Austrian commander, Marshal Bulow, was summarizing today's news. According to the intelligence of the noble officers who defected, a large enemy force is in front of Argento. The enemy has at least a 20% advantage in force against him. Marshal Bulow pressed a pin on the map. In addition, Carcar's reconnaissance troops conducted reconnaissance on Alter today. It is very likely that a fairly large force passed through Alter and headed for Montagnat. The Argento division may be attacked by the enemy. Condor, Considering that the news from Kharkiv was many hours ago, I think the Argento division may have been surrounded by the enemy. Bolu, Argento is very alert. The order I gave him was to retreat to Montagnat if he found more enemies. I just don't know if he can retreat in time. Condor, of course we will have time. The French army can't march so fast. Bolu glared at Condor. Then do you think the Argento division is in danger? Condor was stunned. Oh, this. Bolu sighed. In fact, he had wanted to replace this chief of staff a long time ago, but unfortunately the Condor family was too prestigious and he couldn't dismiss him. Beulah stared at the map for a long time before he said, let's assume that most of Argento's division was defeated. Argento led the remnants to retreat, and he is likely to organize defense here. Beulah put a thumbtack on the name Diego. Beulah, this place has the Bamida River to protect the flanks, and the city is on high ground. If you set up a formation on the high ground where the city is located, you can gain the advantage of being high above. I remember that the slopes here are very steep. In addition, there is a river, so there is no need to worry about the flanks. This is a suitable place for defense. The old Marshal paused and began to give orders. Leave Vukshevich to defend the direction of Verres, and the other troops will move to Diego immediately. I'll go too. Chapter 165 General Frost rushed to the front line overnight. After Lahart personally charged, he finally led his troops into Montagnat. The remaining Austrian troops were blocked in the valley southeast of Montagnat. Lahart climbed up the bell tower of the church in Montagnat. The bell tower was generally the highest point in the city in this era, and only then could he see the situation on the other side of the valley clearly. He estimated that more than 3,000 Austrians were blocked in the valley, and Davout's blue line had advanced to a position less than 100 meters away from Montagnat. There were 3,000 Austrians squeezed into such a small open space. These 3,000 people were attacked from all sides and surrendered quickly. Lahart saw Davout's bald head through his telescope. Now that the sun was setting, the bald head was easy to spot. Lahart, I'll go and congratulate Davout. This is a great victory. There are 3,000 prisoners. In addition to the killed and wounded, at least 5,000 Austrian troops were killed here. This is an incredible victory. He turned and climbed down the bell tower. 10 minutes later, he saw Davout outside the city of Montagnat. Davout didn't know why he looked very unhappy. As soon as they met, Davout asked, why don't you just let your flank skirmishers charge? Lahart was shocked. Skirmishers charge? Are you crazy? The skirmisher formation was too loose. According to general military common sense, it would be a death wish for a skirmisher formation to attack standard line infantry. After all, there is a difference in the density of troops per unit area. Therefore, in the military theory of this era, skirmishers are only suitable for harassment, and they are very vulnerable to cavalry charges or line infantry charges. Davout, there are still my troops in front. The enemy was already in chaos at that time. Even if it was a skirmisher, the enemy would have collapsed if you rushed down. In that case, you would have captured more than just these 3,000 people. Davout looked back as he spoke. At this time, his troops were catching the scattered enemies all over the mountains. Many Austrians were very tired because they had fought for a day, so they simply chose to give up resistance. Anyway, the European army of this era rarely massacred prisoners of war, and many times, after the prisoners of war had their weapons confiscated, they would be released after being in prison for a period of time. The prisoners of war of this era were not as proactive as later ones, and they would not escape from prison or anything like that. The Austrian army was still a kingdom army, with little national consciousness, and they were all here to help the nobles fight. Davout watched his troops capture prisoners inside. It's my fault. I exposed my strength too early. I should have only brought a brigade to guard the hilltop, and I failed General Frost's expectations. A warrant officer next to Davout said, Commander, it's not your fault. You ordered a timely rotation to prevent the troops from being too tired, which was the right thing to do. Davout, don't say anything. Order the troops to prepare torches. We will pursue the defeated enemy overnight today. Yes. After the warrant officer left, Davout took out a banknote and quickly wrote a note. Messenger. Send this to General Frost. At this time, Austrian General Argento was retreating to Diego with 3,000 remnants. Because they slipped away quickly, their army could no longer see the French pursuers. After all, the French had just defeated the thousands of people left by Argento's division, and it was not so fast to reorganize the formation and pursue. But Argento always felt that it would not be so easy to escape. So he called his confidant and put the reins of his favorite horse into his hand. "You, ride my horse and rush to Diego immediately. Let the guards in Diego immediately build campfires around the city. The more the better. Take out all the torches stored in the city, light them and stick them on the ground around the city." The confidant immediately understood. "Are you trying to confuse the French army?" "Yes, I heard that Frost will attack at night. If the enemy who caught up also attacks at night, we will be finished. We must make him afraid of our numbers and dare not act rashly." The confidant saluted, turned around, rode on his horse, took the torch and ran along the road. Argento shouted at his back, "Be careful when riding at night. Don't fall. Don't worry." The response came from afar. And Ning was not worried about the progress of Davout's division. After all, he sent Davout and Napoleon, both of whom were fierce men. No matter how he thought, the Austrian division commander named Argento could not beat the two of them together. As a result, Davout's letter came just after nightfall. Napoleon did not catch up with the battle and was on the road with the artillery. Davout scared the enemy away as soon as he came up. Although he tried hard to stick to the enemy, he was finally driven back to Montagnat by the enemy. Ladhart was almost exhausted from running, but in the end he only had time to block half of Argento's men. After reading Davout's letter, Ning turned directly into the emoticon on the old man's phone on the subway. How could this happen? With a strong army and a brave general, these two things that can bring victory should obviously bring double victory. Why did it turn out like this? But after reading the letter, Berthier seemed to have a different idea from Ning. He said happily, "We actually annihilated half of the enemy's troops. This is a huge victory worthy of boasting. The enemy's Argento division has lost its combat effectiveness and should be sent to guard the rear by Marshal Bulow later." Obviously, Berthier's general view of this era was that defeating half of a division was already a huge victory. But Ning came from the future. When he said great victory in his time, he would think of the siege of Kiev, and no matter how you look at it, the battle force is 800,000 to 600,000, and the advantage is in my hands. Capturing 3,000 alive was too easy for Ning. Ning took the letter from Berthier again and read it carefully again. At the end of the letter, Davout wrote, "I plan to pursue the enemy all night and strive to defeat the remaining enemies in Diego." So Ning asked Berthier, "Is this okay? Won't many people fall behind if we march at night?" Berthier, "If we don't light torches, it is true." Ning was silent. He suddenly realized that his previous understanding of night marches was wrong. When Ning read the history of war before traveling through time, he preconceived that the French Revolutionary Army marched all night all day, just like a certain army later, marching in the dark, so at that time he sighed that it was worthy of being an army that had experienced the revolution, marching all day at night. Many of Napoleon's victories in Italy were actually won by forced marches and night marches. The Austrian army on the other side rarely marched at night. When he fought Lafayette before, he had a hard time organizing a night raid and suffered such heavy losses. At that time, he explained to himself that the French Revolution had just begun and the invincible citizen army had not yet been formed. Now, Berthier's words made Ning realize his blind spot. Torches cannot be used for night raids, so they marched in the dark and fought in the dark, but if they were just traveling at night, torches could be used. This was not the night raid of the army in later generations. Damn, he was misled by modern concepts. Ning, great, then I'll wait for news from Davout. So Ning took a shower and prepared to go to bed, but not long after he lay down, someone outside shouted, "Report, urgent news from Division Commander Davout." Ning sat up, "Bring it in." A moment later, a messenger limped in, "Your Excellency General." Ning hurried forward to support him. "What's wrong?" "The horse slipped on the road and fell down. The horse died and I was injured. If I hadn't met our logistics team, I might have been in trouble." The messenger smiled bitterly, then handed a note to Ning, "Your Excellency General, the news is fine, absolutely fine. Ning, you've worked hard, go and rest. Let the doctor check your leg." After saying that, Ning suddenly hesitated. Doctors in this era are all quacks. They might end up sawing off the poor man's leg. So Ning changed his mind, "Go find my groom, he will wash your wound with strong liquor, believe me, it is more reliable than a doctor." The messenger laughed and said, "You might as well give me some strong liquor. You can drink it too. Go down." After that, Ning turned his attention to the note in his hand. Davout wrote very briefly, "There are a lot of campfires near Diego. which is speculated to be the main force of Beulah. I am letting the troops who have been fighting for a day go to the camp to rest and prepare for the decisive battle tomorrow. And Ning slapped his thigh hard. Good. I finally found the main force of Beulah. Fanny. Fanny immediately opened the door and came in. I'm here. I want to change clothes, and wake up Berthier and the staff. We will move to the front line overnight. It's not that Ning doesn't trust Davu's ability, but mainly because he wants to be present in this kind of battle in person. After all, it's a main battle. How can he not watch it from the side? Chapter 166, Overly Cautious. Davu accidentally hit the target. And Ning took Berthier and LaSalle, as well as a team of hussars, and rushed to Diego overnight. Speaking of the name Diego, and Ning always reminded of a famous football star Diego Maradona, and the famous slogan that Argentina put up when Maradona died, "Don't cry for me, Argentina." Then he remembered the video of the Falklands War between Britain and Argentina released by John Kahn, because the video started with Maradona's hand of God and ended with Maradona's farewell words. After completing this cycle of distraction, and Ning thought of the process of the original Battle of Diego in history. Because the time was a bit long, and the Battle of Diego was not an important battle, it was just that Messina defeated an Austrian division. Compared with the process of the Battle of Diego, and Ning was more impressed by what happened after the battle, after Messina conquered Diego, because the troops were all hungry and their eyes were green, and the military pay had not been paid for a long time. He acquiesced to the troops looting in Diego City. He also went to Diego City to find a beautiful girl to wrestle. As a result, the Austrian veteran Vukcevich marched and attacked overnight, catching Messina off guard. When the Austrian army attacked, Messina fled in his pajamas and finally escaped. Because of this incident, and Ning's impression of Messina was that he was a very capable bandit. When he saw Messina in the daytime today, he was surprised that his impression was completely different. Now, there is another decisive battle in Diego. And Ning only remembers that Messina ran away naked, and has no memory of how he captured the city of Diego. What should I do? Do I really have to rely on the experience I have gained in the Total War series of games? Or should I hand over the command to Davu and watch the show myself? But there is a problem with handing it over to Davu. Messina was able to lead the Battle of Diego because Messina himself was the commander of the vanguard of Napoleon's Italian Corps, so he could command 2 divisions without any problem. Davu is now only a division commander, at the same level as Laharpe, and probably cannot command Laharpe. It is a bit of a stretch to let Davu's division fight against the main force of the Austrian army. And Ning was thinking about all this while trotting in the mountains. Because it was dark, and Ning didn't dare to let the horse run too fast. He himself was not afraid of falling, but if the horse was injured, it would be a waste of time to change horses halfway. The group hurried on in the dark. Most of the people responsible for supply transportation along the way were asleep. After the sentry found that the person coming was a Ning, he subconsciously wanted to shout "Long life the general," but was stopped by Ning. At about 1 or 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, and Ning arrived at Montagnat. On the slope in front of Montagnat, and Ning saw a large number of corpses that had not been taken in yet. His horse also stepped on the wounded, and the screams of the wounded woke up the French soldier sleeping in the tents next to him. The soldier rushed out of the tent and shouted, "Who is it?" "And Ning, it's me, General Frost." The soldiers surrounded him and put the torches close to Ning. Maybe because these soldiers were lacking in vitamins, they couldn't see clearly at night. They put the torches almost to Ning's face before they confirmed that this was General. "Sir, don't shout 'Long live.'" And Ning said immediately, having had experience. The soldiers shut up. "And Ning, go wake up Laharpe." Immediately, a non-commissioned officer ran away. A moment later, Laharpe, with sleepy eyes, ran over in pajamas. "General, why are you here? Didn't you know that Davu encountered the main force of the Austrian army?" "I know, but he wrote back to me saying not to worry, so I plan to rest first and then rush to Diego tomorrow." "Tomorrow? I mean, if I set out at dawn today, I can probably reach Diego at noon." "And Ning, wake up all your troops now, don't sleep, rush to Diego immediately." "Laharpe, the troops have force-marched a long distance today and are very tired." And Ning interrupted Laharpe, "The military situation is urgent, can you afford to miss the opportunity to fight? Wake up all the troops." Laharpe, "Yes, I'll wake up all the troops right away. But it will take some time to assemble the troops and prepare torches. It will take about an hour before we can set off." And Ning pondered for a moment and nodded, Okay, I'll go to the front line first. You will set off in an hour and force march to catch up. Speed is of the essence in war, don't you understand? Yes. Ladharp saluted, turned around and ran towards the tent, while ordering his men, quick, wake up the whole army. Blow the assembly call. And Ning, let's go, continue to Diego. When Ning arrived in Diego, it was already around 3 in the morning. Ning was immediately led to the outside of Davu's tent, and found that Davu was wearing a neat military uniform and was concentrating on studying something on the map at the table. Ning, you didn't sleep. Davu raised his head, and when he raised his head reflected the firelight in the tent. Davu, General. Why are you here at the front? Ning, the battle is about to start, so of course I have to go to the front to take a look. Where's Napoleon? He has been traveling all day with his cannons, and I'll let him go to sleep. Ning nodded and asked, what are you studying? Davu, I'm wondering, why did the enemy choose to fight the decisive battle here? What's the point of their main force being here? Ning, significance. Davu, yes, there are mountains all around here. To be honest, it is not suitable for a large-scale decisive battle. It is very difficult to deploy an army of 10,000. What is the purpose of the Austrian Marshal Buller piling so many troops behind Diego? He should disperse his troops in several directions and look for opportunities to break through from several directions. Ning, do you mean he should divide his troops? Yes, the area around Diego is a relatively open area, where tens of thousands of troops can be deployed, but there are not many such open areas nearby. When I fought with the Argento Division before, because of the terrain, there was no way to deploy troops to take advantage of his strength and eat him up. So even though Buller has so many troops here, they can only go one at a time when fighting. Ning stroked his chin and looked at the map. What you said does make sense. It feels a lot like the Mountain Blade series, where the game console limits the number of troops that can appear at the same time, so they can only go on the field in waves, and after a wave of them dies, another wave of reinforcements will spawn. Thinking about it this way, it is indeed unreasonable for Buller to have so many troops in Diego. Davu continued, so I have an idea. Is it possible that the enemy's main force is not here at all? They just lit so many campfires on purpose to make us think there is a main force here. Ning, you reported to me that there is a main force here. I did think so when I first saw the campfire, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt it was wrong. But my troops have been fighting for a day and are very tired. In addition, I don't have cavalry. If I had cavalry, I could let the cavalry ride on horses and hold torches close to those campfires. If they are fake campfires, the enemy should not have enough strength to guard. Ning, that's easy. I'll bring Lassalle and his cavalry and let him go to find out the truth. As soon as he finished speaking, Lassalle, who was taking care of the horse, opened the curtain of the tent and rushed in, shouting, General, come and see. Ning frowned. What's wrong? He asked as he strode out of the tent. Napoleon and Berthier, who had gotten up outside the tent at some point, were standing by the campfire, looking into the distance. Ning looked in the same direction in confusion, and saw a long line of torches appearing on the mountain road east of Diego. Ning patted Davu's shoulder and said, now Buller's main force is here. Chapter 167 Berthier, I make the following arrangements. In the early morning, the Ladharp division arrived with torches. Berthier immediately arranged for his troops to rest and prepare to wait until it was completely light before going into battle. According to Berthier, the combat effectiveness of the troops who had just finished the work would be discounted, and Ladharp's troops must rest. Ning did not object to Berthier's opinion, because he knew his actual level. He had already thought about it and wanted to give full play to the role of these famous generals under his command. Unless it was a particularly outrageous suggestion, he would follow it. As a result, the painter David, who had been following Ning to record his words and deeds, seemed to be deeply moved. While muttering the general never acts stubbornly, he recorded something in his sketchbook. Ning was too lazy to turn it off. Anyway, it was nice to be praised by others. As the sun climbed over the hill, the entire terrain could be seen clearly on the hill where Ning was. After observing the terrain with a telescope, he pointed to the Baumida River that flowed in an inverted L shape across the plain in front of him and asked Berthier, how deep is this river? Berthier immediately replied, according to the map information I have seen, the deepest place should be less than half a meter, and we can wade across the river. Ning, Lassalle. I'm here. The young hussar appeared with his pipe, Where do you want me to go? I need you to scout the Bamida River to make sure we can cross the river, and by the way, see if the valley of the Bamida River in the north can accommodate a large army. Lasalle saluted and ran away immediately. Then Ning aimed the telescope at the Austrian army around Diego in front. Berthier said beside him, judging from the number of tents, the Austrian army in front of us is about 20,000 to 30,000 people. We are not at a disadvantage. And Ning nodded. Although he had a brilliant record of defeating Lafayette's 40,000 people with 15,000 people, he knew that it was the result of many factors. Lafayette only deployed 20,000 men at the beginning. If Lafayette had deployed 40,000 men directly, Ning would not have been able to fight even the thin red line. After all, Lafayette had enough troops to outflank Ning from both wings. It can be said that Lafayette was not defeated by a serious frontal decisive battle, but by sneak attacks and geographical advantages. Now there is no geographical advantage, and there is no convenience brought by sneak attacks. It can be said that this is the first real frontal battle for Ning, a novice commander. Ning wanted to go directly to Davout to ask for his opinion, and then copy it completely. Anyway, there was David around to take notes, and he would probably immediately activate the effect of the history book of years and write that Ning copied Davout's plan and wrote it as following the advice. But after hesitating for a while, Ning decided to try it himself. At this time, from his position, he could see that Lasalle led a group of cavalry to the Bamida River. The cavalry quickly crossed the horizontal line below the reversal-shaped Bamida River, and then galloped on the west bank of the Bamida River. Ning, it looks like the river valley is a very suitable plain for cavalry to gallop. Berthier, yes, in fact, because of reclamation, there are fertile fields in front of us, which are suitable for cavalry to gallop. The east bank of the river is not very suitable for defense because there are too few barriers. There is only a low wall running east to west, which is not very useful. Indeed, I saw the low wall. Ning used a telescope to observe the river valley plain on the east bank. There were large tracts of unknown crops there, almost no hedges, and some scattered farms and barns scattered among the fields. Ning, how about we send a troop to press from the side? Berthier, this is in line with military common sense, General. It turns out that deploying a troop on the side is in line with military common sense. Marshal Bou on the opposite side should also deploy defensive troops on the east bank of the Bamida River. Ning turned the telescope and looked at the right side of the entire battlefield. There is a road leading to the rear over there. Bou's large troop came from there early this morning. However, when approaching Diego, the road turned east-west, probably because of the hilly terrain. If a unit on the right wing is sent to attack them, this road should be controlled. Not only can the enemy be prevented from retreating from this side, but also the Austrians' reinforcements can be blocked. Finally, Ning pointed the telescope at the center army. Compared with the wide terrain on the riverbank on the left wing, the terrain on the center road is much more complicated. There are many low walls and fences, the Diego Heights occupied by Beulah, and very steep slopes. According to the military theories that Ning had learned in the military academy, the front is not suitable for attack and is very beneficial to the defender. After looking at the terrain, Ning already had a basic plan. He planned to adopt a pressing strategy in the center, forcing the enemy to engage in battle and putting the offensive force on the right. The terrain in the center is complicated, so even if the enemy wants to go down the mountain to attack, it will not be easy to advance. As for blocking the enemy's retreat on the right, it looks tempting, but Ning is not sure he can do it. While Ning was thinking, Lasalle came back from scouting the terrain. He rode his horse directly in front of Ning, dismounted with a beautiful move, and said loudly, "The Bamida River is very suitable for wading. The water is not fast and not deep. The troops can wade across it very quickly. Ning, have you seen the river valley in the north? Can the river valley allow the troops to retreat? Small troops are fine, but it is unlikely that the enemy's large army can go through the river valley." Lasalle said, "Come on, General Frost, let's defeat the enemy here." Ning nodded, "Yes, we really have to defeat the enemy here." Berthier. Berthier stood up. "I'm here, you say. I make the following arrangements. Order Davout to lead 4 brigades and Lasalle's cavalry brigade to cross the Bamida River and line up on the west bank of the north-south part of the Bamida River. Their task is to cross the Bamida River and attack the enemy on the plains on the east bank. Order Laharpe's troops to immediately finish their rest and line up on the right wing of the battlefield. His mission is to attack the avenue east of Diego and push the troops to the side of the avenue. Napoleon will lead the cavalry artillery to reinforce Laharp's troops. And Ning mainly considered that the cavalry artillery might not be easy to cross the river, so he placed Napoleon on the right wing. And Ning, the rest of the troops will be deployed in the middle and led by me personally. The main task is to absorb the enemy troops and create opportunities for the left and right wings. Berthier wrote furiously in a small notebook. After Ning finished speaking, he suddenly remembered that he had not completed an action, so he said, "Repeat it." "Yes, this is complete." Berthier immediately repeated Ning's words in full, without missing a word. He is indeed the strongest chief of staff in Europe. Chapter 168, The Deployment of the Austrian Army. Next, Berthier quickly split Ning's deployment into a series of more detailed and executive orders, such as which 4 brigades should be led by Davout, and Berthier was responsible for all these arrangements. Ning watched Berthier operate, and couldn't help but sigh that Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo is not unfair in history. After all, there was no Berthier to split the orders for him. Soon, various drums and trumpets were heard in the barracks, and the troops began to gather. Before leading the troops to set off, Davout went to Ning's headquarters to confirm his mission. "Ning, remember, you must launch a resolute offensive, and push forward, and push forward again." "Davout, am I the main attack direction?" "Yes, because the terrain on the east coast is simple." Davout saluted. "I will complete the task." Lasalle said behind him, "I'll help you, don't worry. I have personally seen the terrain over there. Although there is no river across, that plain is really very suitable for cavalry to display their abilities. You force the enemy forward and use volleys to force them to deploy in a line formation. Once I charge, victory will come." And Ning looked at Lasalle and smiled. "When you put it that way, it seems like victory is as easy as taking something out of a bag." Lasalle, what? Sorry, I don't speak Latin." And Ning raised his eyebrows. "As long as it is an idiom, it should be translated into the corresponding Latin proverb." Under the pen of David next to him, he has definitely become an extremely learned Confucian general. "No, what should the West call it?" "Ning, what I mean is that victory is very simple, just like a ripe apple hanging on a tree. It will fall down by itself if you kick the tree." "Oh my God, it's really troublesome to prevent my translation system from taking effect." Lasalle laughed. "Yes, it's that simple." Davout was still very serious. "I will definitely use tangible results to wash away the shame of yesterday's defeat." Davout thought that it was his own fault for not defeating the Argento division yesterday, and he seemed to be blaming himself all the time. "Ning, I see that your troops have gathered. Let's go. I'll wait for you to return victoriously here." Davout saluted and left. Lasalle followed him, making jokes as he walked. But Davout hardly smiled. Napoleon stepped forward at this time. "Why don't you let me go with Davout?" It seems that Napoleon has formed a preconceived impression, wherever Davout goes is an important place. "Because there won't be particularly high-intensity fighting on the front." And Ning replied, "You go to the flank, choose a good position, and use close artillery fire to completely disintegrate the enemy. How much victory we will get in this battle depends on whether we can block the enemy's retreat." Napoleon was immediately happy when he heard it. "It sounds like I have a heavy responsibility." And Ning patted Napoleon on the shoulder. "Of course you have a heavy responsibility. I'll look forward to you using fierce artillery fire to completely crush the enemy's right wing." Napoleon smiled. "To the enemy, that's the left wing, Andy." "Oh, okay, the left wing." And Ning waved his hand. "Don't worry about these details, go." Napoleon saluted and walked away confidently. And Ning turned his head and looked around, but didn't see Laharpe. It seemed that the division commander took the order and executed it directly. And Ning thought, could it be that from this time on, the officers under my command will be divided into 2 parts? The direct line and the non-direct line. Laharpe probably thinks that he is already a non-direct line? And Ning thought about it and felt that this was not right, so he said to the messenger, "Come, find Laharpe, I want to give instructions in person." A moment later, Laharpe arrived. "And Ning, your responsibility is very important, and it determines whether our battle can be won." Laharpe, I thought the left wing was the main attack direction. And Ning, the left wing is indeed the main attack direction, but your direction is also very important, which determines whether we can eat dumplings. Laharpe, dumplings. Berthier, Italian is an Italian delicacy, with meat stuffing wrapped in skin, which is a metaphor for annihilating the enemy. His Excellency the General is a genius in language. Good guy, and Ning thought, someone will help me brag about everything I say? Stop bragging, I'm so arrogant. Laharp, I understand. I am the one, right? Yes. Whether it tastes good and whether the meat filling will spread in the soup depends on you. I ask you to block that escape route and let the defeated enemy flee all over the mountains and plains. Laharp saluted. Understood, I will complete the task. Marshal Beulah was also observing the French army. After seeing the French army begin to mobilize, he immediately made a judgment. The French army is going to give us a left hook and launched the attack on our west side. He turned the telescope to look in the direction of the Bamida River. The cavalry team just went to scout and tested the depth and flow rate of the Bamida River and determined that they could wade across the river. He plans to launch the main attack on this side of the river valley. Correct judgment. The marshal put down the telescope. At this time, Condor stepped forward and suggested, then we will deploy the main force here and fight them. They are going to wade across the river, and we have the advantage. Attack while they are crossing the river. Marshal Bolu shook his head. If a large number of horizontal columns are deployed on the river bank, what if the enemy deploys cannons on the side? Would that kill the enemy? To defend on the east bank of the river, we must deploy our troops in front of us, out of the range of the enemy's artillery, in this position. Bolu poked at the map. This will create a very large gap between our front line and the front line. If we deploy a large number of troops on the river bank, the consequences will be disastrous if we are inserted into this gap. Condor scratched his head. Then, Marshal Bolu said confidently, in fact, we can regard the riverbank as a relatively independent battlefield. The riverbank is a plain, and we must deploy troops equal to the number of the enemy to delay them. But the terrain of our left wing is very complicated, and there are fortifications that were temporarily repaired yesterday. As long as there are a small number of troops, the French army can be contained. The enemy is obviously preparing to attack the two wings, and his front is very weak. The troops we have drawn from the left wing can be placed on the front and attack from the hillside. Condor immediately praised, great, a breakthrough in the center. As long as the enemy is cut in two, the enemy will definitely be defeated. Bolu continued, of course, there is a reason why the enemy will make the middle so weak. The terrain in the middle is complicated, and they have more bunkers that can be used for defense, which is not easy to attack. Despite this, we have the advantage of high ground. With the high ground and the advantage in manpower, we will surely win. Come on, I will make the following deployment. So, the Austrian army also began to act like an awakened beast. The decisive battle between the young Andy Frost and the veteran Beulah is about to begin around Diego. Chapter 169 Chief of Staff Bay's speech is too biased. Who says women are inferior to men? Andy was on the hillside, watching Beulah's formation. In this era, infantry formations were all based on the most basic unit, a single horizontal row, so as long as you counted the number of small blocks in the opponent's formation, you could estimate the number of troops on the other side. For this reason, the staff of this era had a special position responsible for holding a telescope to count the small blocks on the other side. Berthier summarized his observations to Ning. The enemy has concentrated its main force in front of us. I'm afraid they are preparing to launch a central breakthrough. And Ning, very good, so we may make progress quickly on both wings. Berthier, the enemy in the front may have a 1.5 times advantage in force. Is that really okay? And Ning, no problem, because I will lead the team in person. Berthier was shocked. In person? This is too dangerous. If you are killed, even an advantageous situation will become dangerous. Especially when you have such a high prestige. You should avoid going to the front line in person. And Ning waved her hand. I know my limits. At this time, Fanny appeared pushing a cart with a small folding table on it. When it was taken down and unfolded, it became a small round table, just enough to hold a glass of wine and a cold plate. Then Fanny took out the prepared cold dishes and placed them on the small table, and then poured the wine. Fanny, this wine is a good wine sent by the local gentry of Savona. It is said that it has been stored in the cellar for 30 years. And Ning, come on, if you have good wine, you should have taken it out earlier. I'll give some to LaSalle. After he drinks it, he can break through the enemy's line by himself. As soon as the voice fell, the sound of artillery came from the opposite high ground. This means that the battle has begun. And Ning gestured to the artillery position next to him. Let's fire too. So the 30 infantry guns placed next to Ning opened fire. Marshal Beulah was amazed. The French army has so many artillery. The troops are close to ours, but there are so many artillery, and they are concentrated for use. Condor, it's normal. The leatherworker is from the artillery. It is said that he can become an artillery officer because he is good at mathematics. You know, making leather shoes also requires mathematics, at least you have to know how to draw a circle. Condor's words amused the officers next to him, and everyone laughed contemptuously. Beulah looked serious. There are so many artillery fire in front of us. Our troops will be killed by a lot of artillery fire when they rush down the hill. Order the troops to act quickly. Attack the enemy with a resolute attitude. At this time, the lookout shouted, "Marshal, look!" Marshal Beulah immediately picked up the telescope and looked in the direction pointed by the lookout. He saw Frost riding away from his position as the commander with the general flag and leaving the small table set up by his maid. The marshal followed Frost's eyes and watched him patrolling among the French troops in front. Condor, this is ridiculous. How can a leatherworker patrolling the front line give courage to the soldiers? Bolu ignored Condor. He shouted to the orderly, "Bring the horse. I also want to patrol the troops and give them a speech." Ning took Berthier and others to patrol between the infantry battalions on the front line and delivered a speech. "You have seen that the enemy has obviously concentrated a large number of troops on the front and is preparing to make a central breakthrough. I must not let them succeed, so I will be with you. I solemnly promise you that you will gain the glory of conquest and the wealth of Italy on the land of Italy. When you go home, everyone will be as glorious as he is and rich as hell." The soldiers shouted in unison, "Long live His Excellency the General! His Excellency the General is healthy and victorious." Ning was very satisfied with the effect of the speech, then turned to Berthier and ordered, "I order that half of the troops on the front be disbanded into skirmishers and dispersed into the bushes near the main line of defense, allowing the skirmishers to harass the enemy with free shooting. Attack the enemy's officers." Berthier was shocked. "What? Our forces are already at a disadvantage, and you still want to send out skirmishers? This will cause our forces to be too thin and be broken through by the enemy." And Ning shook his head. "You don't understand. The era of skirmishers has arrived. The army that has been baptized by the revolution is not like the troops of those officers. Even if they disband their formation, they will continue to fight and will never collapse. They will make the enemy in front suffer." Before the French Revolution, European countries generally looked down on skirmishers, or light infantry, and regarded this unit as an auxiliary force. Even Austria, which had a tradition of using light infantry, was working hard to promote a movement of regularizing light infantry. At this time, light infantry were mainly mercenaries, originally robbers or hunters living in mountainous forests. These people would get bounties according to the results of the war, so they had a strong desire to fight. Frederick the Great once tried to disband the line infantry and use them as light infantry, but found that most of the dynasty's troops were forced to go to the battlefield by officers, and most of them would flee once the formation was disbanded. Therefore, it was unlikely for the dynasty army to use light infantry tactics on a large scale. Over time, everyone also believed that light infantry could only play auxiliary, and the real decisive force was still the line infantry. The French Revolution was different. At the beginning, the French Revolution adopted skirmisher tactics because the troops were poorly trained and could not be arranged in a line formation. But the soldiers of the French Revolution were citizen soldiers, with a sense of honor, fighting for the country, and a strong desire to participate in the war. They would not flee without a formation. Therefore, the combined effect of the two reasons led to the fact that most of the French army in the early days of the French Revolution were scattered soldiers all over the mountains. Later, the officers of the French Revolutionary Army found that the effect was quite good, so the French Revolutionary Army began to use the skirmisher tactics on a large scale. And Ning decided to skip the part of summarizing the experience and use the skirmisher tactics first. It happened that the terrain between himself and the enemy's front line was very complicated, which was very suitable for the deployment of skirmishers. But Berthier strongly objected, "No, if half of the troops are separated, the difference in the number of troops on the front will reach 3-1, which is very dangerous. Unless we have the same geographical advantage as you did last time, we can't stop it." And Ning was about to refute Berthier when he suddenly saw a troop. They were female soldiers. And Ning was going to train all the female soldiers into cavalry, but there were not enough horses. So Ning let these female soldiers receive skirmisher training. Because skirmishers generally do not fight hand-to-hand with the enemy, the disadvantage of the female soldiers' small strength can be ignored. And Ning asked Berthier, "Did you count the female soldiers when you calculated the strength?" Berthier, "What? Oh no, How can the female soldiers be counted? Once they get into hand-to-hand combat, they will immediately retreat. And Ning, you guy, you will pay the price for looking down on women. Berthier, I admit that your female cavalry performed well in previous battles, but that is because they have undergone rigorous cavalry training and are all noble ladies of the nobility. But your female corps are all laundresses and textile factory workers. And Ning shook her head and said to Berthier, let's make a bet. I bet they will hold up half the sky in this battle. After that, and Ning rode his horse to the girls and asked them loudly, girls, why are you staying here? Immediately, a particularly fierce voice responded, General, you should ask your chief of staff. We have been lining up and waiting this morning, but there is no order given to us. We still ran to the front line on our own initiative. And Ning, on behalf of my chief of staff, I apologize to you. He doesn't want you to be involved in the battle. Now, I have a task to give you personally. I ask you to disband into skirmish formations and disperse into the bushes on both sides of the line infantry. The enemy must look down on you as much as the chief of staff, so they will not stop to deal with you. I ask you to aim at the enemy's officers and fire hard. Of course, if you think the officers are too hard to find, you can also aim at the military musicians. I ask you to kill them hard. After saying that, and Ning turned to Berthier and said, you ask the logistics troops to take out some of the strong liquor we collected to treat the wounds of the wounded and give it to the girls to drink. This is also a tradition. In this era, for those troops who need a higher subjective desire to participate in the war, they will be given wine to drink before the battle. This is true for both hussars and light infantry. The light infantry also has the profession of military wine waiter, which is usually held by women. They will carry 2 barrels of wine and follow the light infantry troops. Whoever doesn't have the courage during the battle will take a sip. Berthier muttered, crazy, crazy. And Ning, what did you say? I think the general's idea is profound, Berthier replied. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, Quicklime and Women. This is the defeat of the Austrian army. The Austrian army's attack began. Although Austria has a tradition of using light infantry, the Austrian light infantry are the elite troops of the Austrian army, and are now mainly deployed in the direction of the Rhine front. Beulah did not have many light infantry troops, let alone elite air rifle hunters. But no one thought this was a problem. The Austrian line infantry lined up in neat formations, stepping on the drums and approaching the French line at the foot of the mountain. At this time, someone in the first row of the Austrian army suddenly shouted, "Look, what is that?" The soldiers who had a dead mother's face were startled by this shout, and soon they became agitated. "That looks like a woman. Wearing a skirt." Not necessarily a woman. It is said that the Scottish Highland Regiment in the UK also wears skirts, and the bottom is thicker than yours. Damn it, do the Scottish Highland Regiment have such big pectoral muscles? The officers roared, "Shut up, shut up. Don't be deceived by the French army's evil plan." As soon as the voice fell, the ladies scattered among the bushes opened fire. Immediately, several people fell in the queue. However, due to the poor accuracy of the muskets, the girls' shooting caused casualties. For the well-trained line infantry, these casualties were just light tickling. The officers were shouting to maintain order. "The back row, please come to the front row, maintain the formation, and follow the drums." As they were talking, some of the ladies in the bushes opened fire again. Suddenly, the drums stopped. It turned out that the drummer of this row was shot. Suddenly, the marching pace of the whole row was messed up. The officer shouted, "Don't panic. Follow the drums of the next row." Then the officer fell down, holding his neck. The warrant officer in the team shouted, "The second lieutenant was shot. Send him back quickly. Listen to my orders." Someone shouted, "The enemy is aiming at the drummer and the officer." Warrant officer, "Don't panic. You all know how accurate the guns in your hands are. Keep moving forward." A sergeant shouted, "Let's stop and shoot at the enemy." Warrant officer, "No orders. Our duty is to keep moving forward. It's just the harassment of the skirmishers. Our target is the enemy's line infantry lined up in front." As soon as the voice fell, the drummer in the next row was shot again. Fortunately, the drums played by the military bands of the battalion headquarters were louder, and the military bands of the battalion headquarters were at the end of the thick queue, so they should not be sniped by the skirmishers. Unlike the drummer in the platoon, there was only one person in the front row to block it, and he would still be shot if he was unlucky enough. At this time, the platoons of the Austrian army that were shot by the female soldiers were trying to maintain their marching momentum. The continuous casualties were like mosquito bites, although not fatal, but very annoying. The key is that there are a lot of enemy skirmishers. It seems that the bushes in front and on the sides are full of skirmishers wearing skirts and big breasts. There are flashes and smoke everywhere. This scene is like a person without insect repellent equipment standing in the wild and being besieged by hundreds of mosquitoes. It is not fatal, but it has a great impact on the mentality. And so many people are shooting, aiming at officers and military musicians, there will always be a few shots that hit. Every wave of shooting can always hit a few officers. The key is that the female soldiers are still carrying out the harassment. General Frost did not expect that this will strengthen the blow to the enemy's mentality. The distance from the slope to the front of the French line is not long, only about 400 meters, but the well-trained Austrian army walked the formation crookedly. When they arrived in front of the French line, the Austrian army was already annoyed. At this time, the French line soldiers opened fire. The neat volleys formed a wall of white smoke, and the first row of the Austrian army fell down at once, and the morale of the army collapsed directly. Marshal Bulow on the high ground saw this scene and cursed. It seems that the harassment of the French scattered soldiers on our front line is very effective. But the second column is a complete unit. Bulow was right. After the first column collapsed, the second column stopped in front of the French army. Even from Bulow's position, he could hear the shouts of the officers in that row, "Raise your guns! Fire!" The smoke from the volley formed a smoke wall in front of the Austrian army. Bulow, "Okay, charge up, bayonet charge." The order to charge was issued, and the second column of the Austrian army rushed towards the French army. Then, like a wave hitting a reef, it quickly receded. Bulow cursed, "How come we can't even break through the first column of the French army? Compore, shouldn't we fire a few more volleys in front of the French line now? Charge after causing enough casualties to the French army. Bulow, do you want our army to fire at the enemy who occupied the bunker in the open ground?" Compore closed his mouth. And Ning was also satisfied to see his tactics working wonders. He said to Berthier, "See. Because of the girl's harassment of the enemy's first wave of attack was resolved. The enemy didn't even reach our second line of defense. Berthier, I'm not sure it's the effect of the female soldiers. Maybe the Austrian army is just weaker." And Ning shook his head. Although the enemy's first wave of attack was resolved, there were still more than a dozen enemy lines on the hillside. It was not a time to be happy. And Ning looked at the enemies lining the hillside and suddenly had a great idea. He ran to his artillery unit and ordered the artillery, "Prepare lime bombs." The artillery warrant officer asked in confusion, "Lime bombs? Didn't you and Captain Napoleon say that lime bombs have poor killing effect because the fuse time is difficult to determine?" "Yes, but the situation is different now." And Ning raised his hand and grabbed the unit flag next to the artillery position. "Look, the wind direction is like this now. A slight north wind is blowing, do you understand?" Warrant officer, "No. You don't need to understand, follow my order, load lime bombs. Put the fuse as long as possible." His order was quickly executed. "All artillery, aim at the hillside." And Ning ordered while personally operating a cannon to aim, then took the torch and lit the breech block. The cannon roared, and the shells flew to the hillside where the enemy was rushing down in front. The hillside in front of Diego's high ground was very steep, and the enemy's formation was densely packed on the hillside. And Ning's shells hit the mud in front of the hillside directly. Then, as the fuse burned to the end, the shell exploded and turned into a lime cloud on the hillside. And Ning pointed at the lime cloud and said, "Look! It's a north wind now, and because the hillside is steep, the lime cloud will be entrenched on the hillside. If the enemy troops want to charge, they have to pass through this lime cloud." As soon as Ning finished speaking, other cannons also opened fire. Soon, a whole cloud of smoke and dust composed of lime appeared on the hillside. One after another, the Austrian army crashed into the quicklime. And Ning, "Keep firing. Keep the entire hillside covered with quicklime clouds to delay the enemy's attack." Chapter 171 Captain Bonaparte shows his power. Napoleon Bonaparte was commanding the cavalry artillery and was advancing with La Harpe's right-wing troops. He suddenly noticed the situation on Diego Heights in front of him, So he stopped and took out a telescope to observe. After a moment, he laughed, ha ha ha. And he used lime bombs. He lengthened the fuse of the lime bombs and used them as mines. He put down the telescope and sighed, I always thought that lime bombs were useless garbage. Now it seems that as long as the method of use is correct, there is no garbage prop. At this time, Napoleon's adjutant asked, should we also bring some lime bombs in the future? No, no, that kind of thing is useless. Look at the enemy on the mountain. Didn't they rush directly through the lime dust dispersion area with a strong will? On the hillside, the Austrian army was passing through the lime area. After all, this concentration of quicklime dust, if not inhaled, can only burn the eyes at most. As a weapon that is now very common, the armies of various countries have received training to deal with it. Just hold your breath and close your eyes and pass through the lime area quickly. After all, the stone dust exploded by the lime bomb is not dense, and its lethality to humans is a bit weak. But the inability to kill people does not mean that the formation will not be destroyed. In fact, the Austrian troops who passed through the stone dust had to stop and reorganize, and wipe their faces with something. This has played a very good delaying effect. But Napoleon was obviously not satisfied with this. He said to his deputy, what we are pursuing is to completely kill the enemy. Unless the effect of the lime bomb is so good that the enemy's skin can be burned, eroded, and necrotic. Otherwise, I will never use lime bombs. As he said, he turned around and shouted to the cavalry behind him, forward. Occupy the enemy's flank position. At this time, Napoleon was in a very dangerous position. He was on the right wing of the La Harpe division, which was also the farthest right side of the entire French line. He took a fancy to salient and prepared to mount the gun here to directly bombard the enemy's line from the side. This is the bayonet tactics on the cannon. Napoleon said proudly, this is the evaluation that the general gave me after the last battle. How can we let him down? Forward, artillery team. La Harpe looked at Napoleon's maneuver on the side. He originally thought that Napoleon's troops were simply to strengthen him, so he ordered Napoleon to deploy artillery on the front artillery position. Unexpectedly, Napoleon did not listen to him at all, and ran directly to the flank of the entire front with the cavalry artillery. That position is actually very dangerous. Not to mention the enemy's cavalry. If the enemy's infantry split a team to attack, Napoleon's artillery team might be captured. La Harpe, the whole army advances. Oppress the enemy's space, and don't let them have time to threaten our artillery team. That is the general's favorite, we can't afford it if something happens to him. In fact, La Harpe's division has an advantage in manpower, and pressing forward and shooting at close range can quickly defeat the enemy. It's just that he doesn't want to leave the current bunker area. After all, there is a road between the two armies. Whoever advances to the open area will suffer. La Harpe likes to win the victory that is sure to come in a safe way, and does not want the troops to suffer too many casualties. Who knew that the general's favorites were so crazy? So he had no choice but to advance. And Ning saw La Harpe pushing across the road, and excitedly took a big sip of wine. Good. He turned his head and asked Berthier, let La Harpe separate part of his troops, cross the road, and advance to the high ground. Will it lead to his troops being insufficient to deal with the enemy in front of him? Berthier, no problem, La Harpe's troops should have an advantage, and withdrawing a regiment should not weaken his frontal advantage. And Ning snapped his fingers, okay. Let's do it. You draft the order. Berthier immediately wrote furiously. At this time, the lookout reported loudly, General. The first front line has been broken. And Ning immediately turned the telescope. Because he used all the cannons to fire lime bombs on the hillside to delay the enemy's follow-up troops, the front troops lost the support of artillery and were broken through sooner or later. There were several similar front lines, all of which were built on ready-made complex terrain such as low walls and fences. Many people who retreated from the previous line stopped directly at the second line and joined on the spot. Therefore, such a latter line actually became thicker and thicker, and the enemy needed more powerful troops to break through them. Most of the enemy's troops were delayed by the quicklime cloud on the hillside. After passing through the quicklime cloud, they had to reorganize, wasting a lot of time. And Ning's cannons continued to bombard the mountain. Those lime bombs had fragments when they exploded, which was equivalent to an exploded grenade. It's just that the fuse has to burn for a while, giving the Austrians a chance to run away. Once a shell landed in the middle of the enemy's formation, you can see the gang fleeing in all directions. Sometimes there would be brave officers who would go up and cut the fuse with a saber. And Ning saw all of this, and he became a little anxious. He originally thought that the cloud created by the lime bomb could completely block the enemy's follow-up troops, but who knew that the concentration of lime was too low. Think about it carefully. After all, there is only a little quicklime in a projectile, and it will naturally become very thin after exploding such a large lump. Moreover, lime bombs are not new weapons, and European armies have seen a lot of them. Damn it, I am just a rookie time traveler. If I were the kind of awesome time traveler who can rub all kinds of things with my hands, I would definitely rub a white phosphorus bomb with my hands, and then let the army of this era know what terror is. And Ning remembered watching a World War II blockbuster, and when the German soldiers who were hit by white phosphorus bombs ran out with their bodies burning, the American officers shouted "Cease fire, let them burn." Unfortunately, quicklime is far inferior to white phosphorus, and can only have the effect of delaying the enemy. And Ning looked at the first line of defense that was broken through, and saw that the female soldiers were still maintaining their organization and harassing the enemy troops on the side after the front defenders collapsed. Lime bombs, female skirmishers, all the tricks that could be used have been used. If nothing works, he can only draw his saber and charge with the afterglow knights. Relying on his own front line, he is afraid that he will not be able to win this battle. Davu. And Ning turned his eyes to the left wing of the entire battlefield, looking at Davu's troops deployed along the Bamida River. Davu's troops have been moving and deploying just now, and now he should launch an attack. As long as Davu launches an attack, everything will be fine. When Ning thought so, the artillery of Davu's division opened fire. Davu's opponent is the 4 brigades of the Austrian army deployed on the east bank of the Bamida River. In terms of military strength, Davu does not have an advantage. But Ning fully trusts Davu. After all, that is Davu. If this battle is not won, Ning must review the strategy of overtrusting the combat effectiveness of the so-called famous generals. Ning paid attention to Davu and watched his troops advance through a telescope. The Austrian army deployed across the river began to shoot, and the white smoke even blocked the waves of the Bamida River. At this time, Berthier suddenly spoke up to remind Ning, "General, look at the right wing." Ning hurriedly turned his head. He thought that Laharp's troops had collapsed. As a result, he turned his head and saw that the brigade on the far right of the enemy's line, the brigade on the far left for the enemy, was actually beginning to collapse. Ning, what the hell? He hurriedly raised his telescope to see what was happening, and saw Napoleon personally igniting a cavalry cannon. The shotgun shells sprayed from the muzzle swept across the enemy's line like a wind of death. When Ning saw this scene, he directly looked at the expression on the old man's phone on the subway. What the hell? I half-jokingly said before that when fighting Lafayette, Napoleon's way of fighting was to put a bayonet on the cannon. He is still excited? Napoleon has become a person who charges with a cannon? Reload. Napoleon looked very proud. Quick. Let's fire another shot, otherwise the infantry will rush up to block the artillery line. While the artillerymen were desperately reloading, he turned his head and said to his deputy, "See. The power of the cannon lies in grape shot. If your grape shot does not defeat the enemy's line, it means you are not close enough. The meaning of mobile artillery is to get close enough to where the power of grape shot can be exerted, and fire at close range." Just as the deputy was about to answer, he was shot on the ear. He screamed and fell to the ground. Napoleon didn't care at all, and waved his hand, "Carry him down. Wash his ears with alcohol. Reload for me." A small group of Austrian troops, led by a sergeant, screamed and rushed towards Napoleon's artillery unit that was outside the line. Napoleon personally turned the muzzle of the gun to aim at the Austrian army, and then ignited the breech block. With a loud bang, this team of brave Austrian soldiers fell. Napoleon, reload. At this time, the infantry of Laharp's division rushed up with a roar. Napoleon cursed, "Damn it! Get out of the way. Bastard! I can kill another wave." But no one paid any attention to him. When the soldiers charged, they were very enthusiastic under the influence of adrenaline and could not hear anything. Napoleon cursed and moved away from the cannon, found a higher place to stand, and began to observe the battlefield. Then he immediately found a place where he could continue to perform. "Quick! Put away the artillery carts. We'll go support the middle. It looks like the middle also needs a wave of side fire. Quick!" A warrant officer reported, "Some horses died, and they can't pull so many artillery." Napoleon, "Damn it, Things with horses are always so bad. Then throw away a cannon and retrieve it after the shooting. Use the remaining horses to pull the remaining artillery carts, and move quickly. Speed is of the essence. The short captain jumped on his horse and shouted, "Messenger." A messenger came immediately. "Captain. Go, tell Laggart that I'm going to move to the front battlefield, and he's relying on you here." Chapter 172 Austrians, this is the art of war. Napoleon commanded his troops and rushed to the center. While riding his horse, he thought, the current cavalry artillery is still too troublesome to maneuver. We should make a four-wheeled cannon that can be fired when stopped, and then pulled away after firing. Napoleon thought so. It would be best if the muzzle was facing the back, so that after firing, there is no need to turn around, just fire directly. As he thought about it, he began to imagine the appearance of this new type of artillery vehicle. If the warrant officer next to him had not reminded him loudly, he would not have realized that he was approaching the front battlefield. "Captain!" the warrant officer shouted, "we are approaching the front battlefield." Napoleon suddenly woke up, and then looked around blankly. What the hell? Why are there so many female soldiers? The female soldiers were scattered in the bushes, relying on the cover of trees and stones, firing at the Austrian army on the front battlefield. A lady saw Napoleon and shouted to him, "We are harassing the enemy." According to the general's order. Napoleon looked at the surrounding terrain and exclaimed, "You have occupied a very good side-firing position. We are going to set up the cannon here. Then we will give you the muzzle." "No, no need." Napoleon waved his hand, "We will put the cannon directly in the front, so that we can shoot accurately. Come on, grape shot." The artillerymen skillfully unloaded the cannon from behind the horses and pushed it to the front of the bushes. "No, no, we have to go forward. Let's push it to the front of the millstone," Napoleon commanded. So the artillerymen pushed the cannon out of the bushes. Many Austrian soldiers noticed the cannons that were suddenly pushed out from the side, and they all widened their eyes. Finally, the cannon arrived next to the millstone. Napoleon pulled away the soldiers pushing the cannon, and personally pushed the cannon while turning the wheel to aim at the enemy's line. Then he grabbed the torch and lit the cannon. With a duong sound, half of the platoon that was aimed at was sprayed down. Then the platoon was in trouble, and the soldiers turned around and started running. Napoleon was very happy. "Good. Keep reloading." At this time, another gun of his artillery team also opened fire, and one shot also disintegrated a platoon. At this time, the Austrians finally couldn't sit still. An officer ordered the troops to change formation and prepare to shoot Napoleon's small artillery team close at hand with volleys. Who knew that at this time, a large number of female soldiers ran out of the bushes. A lady with a sergeant's badge shouted, "Girls, line up. Cover the artillery team." The female soldiers lined up next to Napoleon's artillery team and fired volleys. Seeing this, Napoleon immediately shouted to the artillerymen, "Look! Even the ladies are brave enough to face the enemy's rain of bullets, but you are all shrinking your necks." The soldiers were stimulated and completed the reloading as quickly as possible. Napoleon took aim again and blew away the most threatening enemy with one shot. The young captain was very excited. "Austrians, this is the art of war." And Ning watched Napoleon's performance with a telescope the whole time. "What the hell, how did he become like this? Just because I praised him for putting a bayonet on the cannon, he started to play like this?" In the Napoleon Wars, it is indeed mentioned that Napoleon likes to use light cavalry artillery troops to inflict heavy casualties on the enemy. But the biography of Napoleon did not write that he inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy at a distance of 50 meters from the enemy. What made you become such a Bonaparte? Because you didn't meet your destined Josephine. And Ning directly complained about the desire. At this time, the front battlefield was in a strange state. The enemy was lining up to rush down from Diego's high ground. Halfway through the rush, there was a Napoleon with a team of cavalry artillery sandwiched next to them. Next to the cavalry artillery team, there was a group of female soldiers who gave up the skirmish formation and lined up in a line to shoot at the enemy from the side. At this time, if the enemy dispatched several regiments to attack Napoleon, the brigade deployed in the front would not be able to rescue him at all. Not to mention that the enemy might have cavalry. No, the Austrian army definitely has cavalry. The Austrian cavalry is still hiding on the high ground, because Diego's high ground is higher than Ning's headquarters, so he can't see where the enemy's cavalry is. If the enemy cavalry sneaks down, Napoleon will become a prisoner of Austria. Ning was in a dilemma. Is it only possible to send Christina and the others? But this narrow terrain full of obstacles is not suitable for cavalry deployment at all. Ning's original idea was to send Christina and the others to the left wing after La Salle open up the situation. In this way, a large number of cavalry can sweep across the entire battlefield like a whirlwind, which is cool to think about. Ning was hesitating when he suddenly saw the Austrian cavalry appear from the east of the high ground. They rushed towards Laharque's troops along the road. 10 minutes ago Marshal Beulah found that his left wing collapsed. He cursed in a low voice, "Damn it, we clearly have fortifications on this side of the road, how could it be so easily defeated by the enemy? Condor, should we use the reserve troops?" "No." Marshal Beulah denied it sternly, "It's not time to use the reserve troops. The battle has just started for such a short time, and the reserve troops are used. This is a very dangerous signal." After a brief thought, Marshal Beulah order the cavalry troops to attack eastward and sweep the enemy's infantry troops along the road. At least force the enemy into a square formation. The troops arranged in a square formation moved very slowly, which basically meant that they lost their offensive capabilities. In fact, moving the square formation itself is a very difficult task. After all, when the square formation moves as a whole, only the soldiers on one side walk normally, and the soldiers on the other three sides either walk sideways like crabs or walk backwards. After the first messenger ran away, Marshal Beulah gave another order, send officers to gather the scattered troops on the left wing and reorganize the front when the enemy is forced to form a square formation. Immediately, someone else ran away. Marshal Beulah encouraged the officers in the headquarters, "It doesn't matter. Only the left wing collapsed. Did the enemy's front line also collapse? This is considered a draw." Suddenly someone shouted, "Look, over there." Marshal Beulah immediately looked towards the front battlefield, and saw Napoleon occupying the flank and firing at his attacking column. "What?" Beulah was shocked. "Why would the artillery run to this position? This is not in line with the principles of deploying troops." Condor immediately asked, "Should we call back some of the cavalry?" "No. There are a lot of enemies on the left wing. If there are not enough cavalry, we can't force them to form a square formation. Besides, the enemy's artillery is so close to our infantry. Let the infantry charge and we can take it down. Who is willing to lead an infantry charge?" An officer with a beautiful mustache stood up. "I'll do it. I'm the son of the Duke of Steiermark. Please give this honor to me." "Your Excellency Marshal." The marshal looked at the officer carefully, nodded, and made a gesture, "Give him a military flag. Child, take this military flag and go to win victory." Chapter 173 National Self-Defense Forces, Forward. Ning saw a flag coming down from the high ground. It was not the kind of troop flag that every regiment had, but a larger flag. This meant that Beulah had given a flag to someone and asked him to lead the charge. It couldn't be that Beulah charged in person, right? The old man was already over 70 years old. Ning immediately directed the cannon, "Aim at that flag, fire." The flag was still far away from Napoleon's position, so it could still fire a wave of blocking shots. When it got close to Napoleon, with the poor accuracy of modern artillery, it was unclear whether it would cover Napoleon or send him to his grave. The shells fell around the enemy troops that followed the flag, but because the slope was too steep, the angle of the shells was not good and they could not bounce. Yes, in this era, rushing down from a relatively steep slope also has this advantage: the enemy's shells will not bounce when they hit it. If Ning hadn't loaded lime bombs, this wave of bombardment would have been completely ineffective. The lime bombs exploded on the ground, and the fragments knocked down several people, and then formed a white quicklime dust cloud. But the charging enemy rushed into the dust cloud without fear. The Austrian soldiers did show admirable courage. Ning shouted, "Ms. Oliver, I order you to bypass the front battlefield and attack the mill." This is the only mobile force in Ning's hands that can bypass the front battlefield. Although this terrain is not suitable for cavalry to play, it can be said that this terrain is basically impossible to charge, and the cavalry can only be used as a melee soldier on horseback. But Ning still gave the order. He couldn't let Napoleon be captured. In fact, if you think about it carefully, it's okay to be captured. The Austrian army should not hurt Napoleon, who has a noble title. The group of Austrians who rushed down had already reached the mill. Ning saw that Napoleon had turned the muzzle and fired grape shot at the flag. As a result, a wave of shrapnel went down, and the person holding the flag did not fall. Obviously, a group of people around him fell. The female soldiers who covered Napoleon also launched a charge and fought with the Austrians. The cavalry were marching through the bushes between the hills to take a detour, and had not yet arrived. Ning saw Napoleon draw his saber and stand on the cannon to command the artillerymen. It looked like he was going to fire another shot at this distance. Finally, the loading was completed, and Napoleon stood on the cannon, pointing his saber at the Austrians not far away. A soldier lit the fuse of the cannon. The muzzle sprayed fire almost at the Austrians. While Ning was nervously watching the scene, Berthier suddenly said, "The cavalry on the left wing has attacked." Ning quickly put down the telescope and looked at the left wing. The field of view of the telescope was too small to see things in a wide range. He saw Lasalle's cavalry appear in the direction of the river valley in the north, forming an extra long line in two horizontal columns. It looked like a moving wall, and like a huge wave during its tsunami, rolling towards the enemy on the plains along the Bamida River. A few minutes ago, Lasalle had been watching Davout's troops push across the Bamida River from the river bank. He was waiting for Davout's troops to gain a foothold on the east bank of the river. Davout's flag was always at the forefront of the troops, leading the troops to wade through the water. The enemy troops on the riverbank continued to fire, and French soldiers continued to fall into the water, causing a small-scale chaos. However, perhaps inspired by the flag of the division commander, the entire army's crossing of the river was not interrupted. The artillery assigned to Davout's division kept roaring on the riverbank, doing its best to provide support to the troops crossing the river. Lasalle watched on the shore and chanted, "Come on. Cross the river and deploy in front of the enemy. Hurry." Finally, Davout's flag landed on the river bank, and soon most of Davout's division troops also landed on the river bank. A small number of troops were still in the water because of the bend of the river bank. The troops that had just landed began to form a team and then opened fire on the Austrians. Lasalle saw this scene, put away his telescope, picked up the wine flask from the saddle, took a big sip, then hung up the wine flask and picked up his pipe. "Everyone. It's time for us to attack. We rush across the river and then deploy on the river bank. The formation is a horizontal line, a perfect horizontal line. The key is speed. As long as we rush forward at a high speed, the enemy will have great psychological pressure facing the horizontal line. Let's go, warriors." After saying that, Lasalle took the lead and rushed into the river, and the horses' hooves splashed in the water. His cavalry followed him and rushed into the water, splashing water everywhere. Soon the cavalry reached the other side. "Lasalle, deploy the formation. Quick, horizontal line." The well-trained cavalry immediately deployed their formation on the river bank. A brigade of cavalry deployed a horizontal line nearly 150 meters wide, with the riders' knees touching their knees. Lasalle stood alone at the front. He drew his saber. "For France. Charge." The bugler blew the charge, and the cavalry brigade followed Lasalle and began to speed up. Speed is the key. Lasalle shouted, "Faster, faster." As long as the cavalry ran, the horses would chase each other because of instinct, so the speed would get faster and faster. In this process, the formation would gradually disintegrate, because after all, some knights had better horses and ran faster. But the prestige brought by the high-speed charge was very amazing. As long as the cavalry was fast enough, the enemy's morale would collapse before the cavalry really came into contact with the enemy. Lasalle led the cavalry to charge at full speed. The enemies lined up in a horizontal line on the riverbank saw the huge wave approaching from the side, and they were directly shocked. The collapse happened in an instant, and the most marginal brigade was the first to collapse, and then the chaos spread to the entire army. The enemy began to howl and flee, and then was caught up by the cavalry. A few people were slashed from behind by sabers, and more people fell down and were trampled to death by horses. No matter how hard the Austrian officers screamed, they could not stop collapsing. Davout was watching all this happen from the front, and his deputy said anxiously, "Let's charge too, otherwise all the credit will be taken by the cavalry." Davout, "No, charging will cause chaos in the formation. Our task is not only to defeat the enemy in front, but also to outflank the enemy on Diego Hill from the side. This is the most important task that the general has given us. All battalions, move forward." Davout said as he stepped forward, his steps firm and unwavering. His troops also began to move, like an iron wall, and the dense forest of spears rose and fell within neat steps, as if they had the pulsation of life. The 4 brigades of French troops rolled forward like a steamroller, and all the mess left by the cavalry charge was under their feet. Chapter 174 Total Retreat. Ning was very excited. "Great, Davout and Lasalle defeated the enemy's flank, we won." With a pop, Fanny opened a new bottle of champagne, startling everyone who was watching the battlefield. Facing everyone's gaze, Fanny asked in confusion, "Hey, isn't it time to open the champagne yet?" "Ning, you can open it." After that, he continued to watch the battlefield. Davout and LaSalle on the left wing have completely controlled the situation. The enemy has been completely defeated under LaSalle's whirlwind offensive, while Davout's troops are advancing steadily, making it impossible for the enemy to reorganize their formation. In just half an hour, Davout's troops should be able to outflank the side of Diego Heights. And Ning saw that Davout had ordered the artillery originally set up on the west bank of the Bamida River to start moving, probably preparing to move closer to the enemy in front. Unfortunately, Diego is a high ground, and it is difficult for artillery to hide it. On the right wing, after the 1st Regiment was overwhelmed by the cavalry, Ladharp's troops quickly formed a hollow square to resist the enemy's cavalry charge. Several squares were on the main road, directly blocking the main road. In other words, Ladharp also completed the task. The enemy is now trapped in a jar. Although they can escape through the mountains north of Diego, the mountains are very difficult to walk, and the organization must be dispersed. It can be roughly assumed that Ning has destroyed the main force of Beulah in the Battle of Diego. Of course, this kind of annihilation is somewhat different from the annihilation in later generations. The annihilation in later generations is real annihilation, and the prisoners of war are locked up in places. Now there is no ability to manage so many prisoners of war, and most of the prisoners of war should be let go. In the late period of the French Revolution, there was indeed a practice of not letting the captured prisoners of war go and escorting them to the rear to build fortresses as coolies, but that was already in the late period, and the organizational ability was not at the same level as it is now. Now the enemy should be able to make a comeback after a period of reorganization. But this reorganization time is probably not short. And Ning was thinking about this when Berthier said, "Why hasn't Marshal Beulah surrendered yet? It's time to surrender now." And Ning, maybe he wants to make a last stand. His reserve troops should not be used yet. As soon as he finished speaking, Marshal Beulah's reserve troops appeared in the direction of Ladharp. And Ning was shocked. He wants to open up the main road defended by Ladharp and give his troops a way out. "Lana. I'm here." Lana stood up straight. "Please give the order, General." Immediately led the training regiment to march. "No, run to the flank and block this gap. And the Knights of Afterglow will also reinforce you. Go." Lana saluted and ran away. And Ning, "Messenger. Here. Tell Davout to speed up." The messenger saluted and turned to leave. Berthier, it will take more than 10 minutes for the messenger to run to Davout. At this time, Davout should have reached a high ground. This messenger is actually not very meaningful. And Ning cursed and continued to focus on Ladharp. With the cooperation of the newly joined infantry, the first phalanx of Ladharp had been defeated. And Ning cursed, "I don't believe that I can't have this dumpling today. Julian, bring my horse." Berthier was shocked. "What are you going to do?" "Ning, do what a commander should do. In order to win the glorious victory that is so close, I must appear where I am most needed." Berthier, this. At this time, Beethoven and David, who had been recording everything, pressed Berthier's shoulders on the left and right. "Mr. Chief of Staff," Beethoven said, "let the hero do what he should do. David, a brave commander must be with his soldiers." Berthier moved his mouth, but in the end he said nothing. He watched Ning climb onto his horse and ride straight to the front line of the right wing. The flag bearer and bugler carrying the general's flag followed Ning. Even Beethoven and David climbed onto their horses and followed the commander's footsteps. Berthier was to serve as the command center here, and he could not leave this place. After Ning and his party left, the maid Fanny asked Berthier, "Do you want some champagne?" Berthier sighed, "I need some wine. I feel very tired to have such a commander." "Fanny, you'll get used to it." Marshal Beulah suddenly took a breath of cold air. Because he saw the largest and most decorated flag on the opposite side of the French army moving to the flank. The enemy commander actually rushed to the front line in person? This courage is worthy of praise, but not worth promoting. Bolu sighed, "It's over, it seems we will be annihilated here. Condor has not given up, maybe we can let the sniper kill the leatherworker." "It's useless, even if the enemy commander is killed here, they will still complete the encirclement. From the time the right wing collapsed, we are finished. Condor, maybe we shouldn't have deployed the reserve troops to the left wing just now, but let them on the right wing to resist the enemy troops that were outflanking. Where should we line up?" On the high ground? How can this high ground accommodate so many people? If we don't line up on the high ground, we will be hit by the enemy artillery in front. Bolu shook his head. We failed. Accept the reality. The leatherworker you despised and his civilian officers did a good job, very good. At this time, a cavalry lieutenant approached the marshal and reported loudly, "Report. Your Excellency Marshal, we found a small path, you can retreat from here." Bolu was overjoyed and asked, "How many troops can take that path?" "Well, it's just a path a shepherd showed us. It should be fine for us to follow your headquarters. The rest is." Bolu pondered for a moment. His expression became firm again. "Although we were wiped out here, we still have Vukshevich's division. If we mobilize some of the defenders from the fortresses of Milan and Mantua, maybe we can still withdraw 20,000 troops to defend the Po River. It's not time to despair yet. As long as we defend the Po River for a while, the reinforcements from Vienna should arrive. His Majesty Franz II will definitely not sit idly by." The marshal seemed to have a second spring, and he ordered energetically, "Order the corps officers of each department to gather and go together. Hurry. Also, collect the Imperial Eagle flag as much as possible and don't let the enemy seize it." After the marshal's order was issued, the Austrian staff immediately got busy. The marshal's orderly brought a horse and helped him onto the horse. At this time, the marshal suddenly remembered something and said to the orderly, "You, find a road sign and write on it with lime, 'Marshal of the Holy Roman Empire Beulah pays high tribute to the French commander Antifrost. You are the most outstanding officer I have ever seen.'" Chapter 175 The Birth of the Horse Artillery Song. Ning had just arrived at the flank, and before he could fight with the enemy began to retreat. Because the main road was blocked by the La Harpe division, and the La Salle cavalry was hacking people everywhere in the valley to the north, most of the Austrian troops chose to flee directly into the hilly area north of Diego. Now the mountains and plains were full of fleeing Austrian troops. Ning shouted to the people around him, "Military flags, grab the people holding the military flags." In addition to being a trophy representing honor, the beautifully made military flags are also important props for organizing troops. Military flags are often used in troop formations. After all, the organization of the troops and the initiative of the soldiers in this era were not high, especially the Austrian army was still a dynasty army. The big soldiers were forced to go to the battlefield, and without military flags, the organization would be halved. Therefore, capturing military flags in this era has practical tactical significance. Hearing Ning's words, Lanz led a team of infantry and rushed towards the enemy's military flag. Lanz's troops had just entered the battle, and their physical fitness was very good, which was not comparable to the Austrian army that had been fighting for most of the day. They quickly caught up with several Austrian soldiers with flags and quickly seized their flags. Ning saw Lanz holding a flag under his arm and running towards another flag that was still fleeing. Originally, Ning had envisioned using Lanz in a situation where the front was in danger and the teaching regiment and the Sunset Knights were thrown into hand-to-hand combat. As a result, due to Napoleon's tricks, the enemy only broke through the first line of defense and did not need to use the reserve troops at all. As a result, Lanz could only use the physical strength that had been retained until now to chase the flags. It can only be said that the subjective initiative of these powerful generals had a great impact on the battle situation that Ning had expected. The same was true for La Salle on the left wing. It was really unexpected that a charge would defeat all the enemies. As expected, with these fierce generals, he only needed to draw lines and set up formations on the ground, and they would win the war by themselves. And Ning did not need to be an outstanding military strategist. He only needed to use knowledge that was ahead of his time to concentrate the fierce generals in his hands, and then he could sit back and enjoy the fruits of his labor. What a beautiful thing this is. Now we should quickly promote Davout to brigadier general, so that he can lead an army. Throw an army to Davout, and assign La Salle and Napoleon to his men, and we will have an invincible army. Let him go to the battle, and Ning can slack off. Thinking about these things, Ning couldn't help but smile. He didn't know that at this time, David was sketching him with a sketchbook, and this sketch later gave birth to the famous painting General Frost smiling at the victory of Diego. At this time, Napoleon came from a distance on horseback. "Andy!" he shouted loudly, and then realized that it was not good to call the general's name in front of so many troops, so he changed his words and said, "General Frost. Did you see my performance just now?" Ning turned his head to look at Napoleon, and found that he really came back in one piece. As expected, he had a net force field, and bullets could not hit him. No wonder in real history, during the Battle of Lodi, Napoleon personally rushed onto the bridge with a flag, and took several waves of grape shot from volleys and cannons at a very close distance, but nothing happened. Several groups of people around him died. And Ning, you lunatic, I'm going to replenish your artillery again. Do you think it's so easy to train an artilleryman? Napoleon smiled and said, but I killed so many enemies. Don't you think this exchange is great? Yes, thanks to you, only one breakthrough on the front line has been made. You are the first to make a contribution in this battle. Napoleon smiled. Really? Then I won't be polite. Let me tell you, I have thought of a new thing that can take the use of mobile cavalry artillery to a higher level. The current cavalry artillery has to be unloaded from the horse before firing. I want to make a four-wheeled carriage, put the gun on the four-wheeled carriage, and use 4 horses to pull such a gun carriage. Although this will be very limited in rugged terrain, it will exert amazing strength on plains. And Ning frowned, with an expression of what the hell. Napoleon's description reminded him of something called takhanka, which was a kind of combat carriage developed by the Red Army during the Soviet-Russian Civil War. It was a Maxim heavy machine gun on top of a four-wheeled carriage. The Soviets even made a song to praise the soldiers who used this carriage, the Song of Takhanka, also known as the Song of the Horse-Drawn Machine Gun. As Napoleon was talking, and Ning began to hallucinate the song in his mind. The Soviets made takhanka, and you are going to make takhanka. It seems that Napoleon is going to rush all the way to become an expert in close-range artillery. Napoleon, what? Why do you have this expression? Do you think this idea is not good? And Ning scratched his head. I don't think so, you can try it. He paused, and said to Napoleon, by the way, seeing your heroic posture in battle, I suddenly got an inspiration just now, and a song is about to come out. Then Ning began to sing the revised version of Tachka's song. Anyway, Tachka's tactics were to turn the car around and stop in front of the enemy, which was the same as the combat actions of horse-drawn cavalry artillery, so the lyrics could be changed. And Ning could only sing the first paragraph of the song, and her singing skills were not good, so she could only barely sing the melody. Beethoven's eyes lit up when he heard it. Great, such a lively melody. Are you still thinking about music when you are commanding the battle? You are worthy of being a great commander. No, you misunderstood. I was just stimulated by Napoleon's idea just now, and my mind was full of this melody. Napoleon was very happy. Is this a song specially for me? Great, everyone in the cavalry artillery unit must be able to sing this song in the future. Hey, Ludwig, get the score ready for me. And Ning was a little surprised, because Napoleon called Beethoven's name directly, and it can be seen that they have a good relationship. And Ning only knew that Napoleon and Davout had a good relationship because they had a common language in the battle on the ridge, but she didn't know when his relationship with Beethoven also became good. Beethoven nodded. I will write the song as soon as possible. And Ning, do you need me to sing it again? No, once is enough. I memorized the whole score in one go. He is worthy of being a music saint. And Ning teased, you dislike my bad singing, right? Beethoven also laughed, because Ning was usually very humble, so they often spoke directly to Ning like this. Hear and you sing, Beethoven said, I feel that God is still fair and does not give all the benefits to one person. At this time, a messenger came quickly. General, Colonel Berthier asked me to inform you that the flag of the Austrian Marshal Bulow has withdrawn from the army. We have achieved a complete victory. And Ning, got it, go back and tell Berthier that I will meet him in Diego City. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.